So for all of 2025, I have been running a book club, and it has both been the best thing that's ever happened in my entire life and the joy of my day every single day, and also shatteringly destructive for my self-confidence, because this is a group of some of the coolest, smartest, funniest people I've ever encountered, and I have been forcing them to read the worst books ever published. Every month, I think I'm picking something good, and then it turns out to be absolute dog water. In the beginning of the year, we read, I think, 3 books in a row that graphically detailed poop stuff. All of the queer books we've read have been queer by name only, written by baby gays with nothing to say about the queer experience. In July, it's hard for me to even talk about it. We understood new lows that books could go to with the book that we read in July, The Simple Art of Killing a Woman. I think we all gave it 1 star. It was the most racist, bioessentialist, stupid in every single way book any of us have ever read. The message of that book was essentially like a white woman can go into a community of indigenous people that has high rates of violence against women because men, and specifically indigenous men, have inherent characteristics that cause them to be violent against women. She can go do whatever she thinks is right and is going to solve the issues. And then when she gets bored of that, she should go back to her home in the city and dance with her friends in a club. And it's happy ending, and she's the heroine, and we're supposed to love and support her the whole time. It's the biggest piece of garbage written by a woman who thinks that she's a feminist and is truly just a bigot. This month was the last straw. We read what was supposed to be like a mystery thriller that the author proudly says in interviews she didn't plan out. And you can tell. She also just doesn't know how to use punctuation, and almost every sentence was grammatically incorrect. I have led these people to places they wouldn't go with a gun, so I thought I would let them take their revenge on me. Without my oversight, they have compiled a list of the worst books that they could think of to break my spirit with. My wonderful partner created a vote, almost 200 responses, and I have 3 books that I'm going to read in this video that I have no idea what they are. I have no idea the contents of. I'm just looking at these and I'm glad that none of them are A Little Life, because the people in this book club are sick and twisted, and they would do that to me. I know that was one of the runner-ups. I also remember when I first brought up this idea with them, Ryan specifically was looking up the longest World War II books ever written, and I'm really glad that none of these are that. So I'm going to start by opening and reading the book that came in 3rd place. I have no idea what this is. I changed out of the sweater that I was wearing. It's freezing cold in my room. I'm sweating. I am so incredibly nervous about this. These people are monsters. Okay, I'm going to show you first. I'm closing my eyes. What is it? Okay, it's either called Your Name or YN by Esther Yee. I have heard genuinely awful things about this book. I'm glad this isn't the one that my partner had to purchase. It's going to be so bad. I already know it's going to be so bad. I've only heard bad things. I don't even know what it's about. Should we read the inside? Surreal, hilarious, and shrewdly poignant, a novel about a Korean-American woman living in Berlin whose obsession with a K-pop idol sends her to Seoul on a journey of literary self-destruction. Is it going to be written in poems? Oh, no, but it is the worst font I've ever seen. Oh, that's good. That's great. This is a book, I have heard of this book only in the context of it's really bad. It's as if her life only began once Moon appeared in it. The desultory copywriting work, the boyfriend, and the want of anything not Moon quickly fall away when she beholds the idol in concert. Wow, this summary is written in an insufferable way. Where Moon dances as if his movements are creating their own gravitational field. On live streams, as fans from around the world comment in dozens of languages, even on skincare products endorsed by the wildly popular Korean boy band, of which Moon is the youngest, most luminous member. That was all one sentence. Okay. Seized by ineffable desire, our unnamed narrator begins writing Your Name fanfic, in which you, the reader, insert your name and play out an intimate relationship with the unattainable star. Then, Moon suddenly retires, vanishing from the public eye. As Your Name flies from Berlin to Seoul to be with Moon, our narrator, too, journeys to Korea in search of the object of her love. An escalating series of mistranslations and misidentifications lands her at the headquarters of the Kafkaesque entertainment company that manages the boy band until, at a secret location, together with Moon at last, art and real life approach their final convergence. So I will say that sounds interesting, and I think that's why people hate this so much. I think it does have a premise that could have been done well, And I don't think it manages to do that. And I can tell just by the summary, which was probably not even written by the author, that the writing is going to be difficult to like at the very least. But I'm just honestly happy that this isn't some slop romance book, because I was kind of expecting all three of these to be that. So I'm going to go start this, and then I'll update you when I'm somewhere within it. I'll see you then. Hello, I have finished Your Name by Esther Yee. I think this was a great pick to torture me with. This isn't something that I would typically read in bad faith and have fun reading in bad faith. This is more like a book that I should have liked and should have been good and pissed me off the whole time because of the way the author decided to write it. It was insufferably pretentious, like I expected it to be from the summary. Like we established just a second ago, this is about a woman who is obsessed with a boy from a boy band. It begins with the narrator being invited to this boy band's concert by her roommate, who's a big fan, and this concert kicks off her obsession. And it is told in the most obnoxious prose I have ever encountered. Listen to how she describes her roommate. Her tireless overtures of care and my circumventions of them had come to form a texture of cohabitation that could almost be called a friendship. The entire book is written like that. So when I'm giving you this summary, I'm going to intersperse little bits of absolutely obnoxious prose in there. I need you to know that everything I say is told in this way. It is opaque. This is how the narrator's internal dialogue is written. It's also how she speaks to others, and it's also how everyone else speaks to her. There is no differentiation in voice, even though it's trying to have a really strong and different voice. So she goes to this concert with her roommate, and she doesn't really get the hype, and then she lays eyes on Moon, and it all clicks into place. And I'll say that it's less forced than I'm making it sound. It feels pretty realistic to how a teenager's obsession with an idol is. Like, she sees him as both incredibly inhuman, but then also achingly human at the same time. She isn't able to pinpoint exactly what the feeling is, but she's feeling it so deeply. The problem is she's not a teenager. She's well into her 30s, and he is 20. Listen to how she describes him. His plainness seemed a calculated strategy to foreground the intensity of his gaze, which discorded with the stony coolness of his pallor. Holy shit, shut the fuck up. Put the thesaurus down. She's almost put into a trance. She believes that he's singing to her. She goes home from the concert. She starts watching his live streams, commenting weird stuff. And not weird in a fun way. She says please, save your insipid affection for the others. Meals shatter my focus. I can't believe I have to eat 3 times a day. Where's the ritual that matters? Where's the joy in the weirdness there? You know what I mean? It's nothing. Some annoying and useless faux intellectual ramblings lead us to the next chapter, where she is at a party full of annoying and useless faux intellectuals. The party is of the guy she's seeing, Masterson. When everyone leaves, the two of them are having sex, and she imagines them both as having sex with Moon, except she doesn't really have what she thinks is a simple sexual desire for him, and that frustrates her, but she can't imagine Masterson having sex with Moon. And this is pleasing. The next morning, he's in bed reading a book that she lent to him, and he finds a photo card of Moon, and he starts philosophizing like the insufferable character that everyone in this story is, about fandom culture and about positioning idols as gods and obsession. And the narrator is adamant that he just doesn't understand it. He doesn't get their connection. But she doesn't explain it. I think can't really explain it to herself. It's pissed her off, though. She's angry and she leaves in a huff. The next time they have a conversation, he tells her that he is unable to fall in love with her, and she says, "Of course you can't. You don't even care about me. I left my journal here and you didn't even read it. You're not curious about me." She mocks being in love. He says, "I know what being in love is like, and it's not like this." She's like, "That's so cliche, being in love." And he says, "You bully the feelings out of everything. I want to feel like I'm coming home to you." It's so corny. It's so Tumblr poetry. A lot of lines in here, I felt like she wanted them to be posted on Tumblr in a fake typewriter serifed font. Really, really high contrast. Center aligned in the middle of the page. You can envision it. She leaves his place. They've kind of broken up, and she sends him a letter, but she crosses out his name to write Moon. And then she gushes about Moon, and then she writes her first piece of fan fiction about Moon. And she sends this letter to Masterson, who does not reply. She starts kind of getting into the fan fiction scene, and it does talk about fan fiction in an interesting enough way. I think it has some things to say about the writing of fan fiction and the headspace that reading it and writing it puts you into. Like about how you can feel the frustration of the writer's position, trying to alleviate that frustration and then getting even more frustrated that it's not working. After a little while, she goes to a fan meetup, which doesn't make sense to me because this character is not developed at all, and I think is hiding behind this thing where like she's always talking about being a blank slate and not wanting people to relate things to her because it's trying to say something about your name fan fiction and having a blank slate as a character. But I think that just means that you've written a story with a character who is making choices and doing things, and you don't understand that character because you're like, this is supposed to be anyone who could be her, like a your name fan fiction. It's stupid. You're hiding your lack of skill, I think. Anyway, her obsession feels so personal and private, and yet she goes to this fan meetup. It doesn't really make sense. I don't understand her motivations, and I will never come to. At this meetup, for some reason, they're like, we need you to dress up as Moon. They get a fan to dress up as each member of the boy band and then go around like taking photos with people. And she sees here someone that she had met at Masterson's party, Lise. Lise talks about how she can't even look at the narrator because even though she knows that she's not Moon, she's still so embarrassed to feel like she's talking about Moon in front of him. She opens up about how she read this fan fiction where Moon had been adopted at birth and he was like looking for his biological mother, and she decided reading that fan fiction that she was his biological mother, and she wants to mother the narrator. The narrator is the one who wrote the fan fiction that she's talking about. Nothing really comes of this until a little while later when she runs into Lise on the street and she begs the narrator to allow her to mother her as Moon. While they're having this conversation, she says, "The big public clock gave the time. It was a terrifyingly specific number." What does that mean? You're just saying words. This conversation with Lise is making the narrator uncomfortable. She was already in this sort of unsettled state because she had seen that Moon was the #1 subject on the fanfiction website, and she thought like, I thought that this was my transgression, and instead it's conformity. She says what she believed to be a destabilizing force was actually a stabilizing one. And like, sure, these ideas are interesting in a vacuum, but it doesn't make sense here. It's just telling us these things without ever showing them or digging deeper into them. It could be interesting, but like I will say many times in this review, it is just word salad. Like, for example, what happens next in their conversation? The narrator says, "I don't know what to do with the rest of the day. I'll go home, and then what? What do I do with all that time ahead of me? But there's also not enough time. For what? I don't know." "It's simple," Lise said. "You find the people you love and follow them to the ends of the earth. Nothing else matters." But what if they turn around and spit at me? What if they make the kind of gesture people make at stray dogs, like they're wiping the dog off the face of the earth? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? How do we get here in the conversation? None of this means anything. You're just trying to have like a beautiful poetic MFA line, and you're not even succeeding at that. It's all so cliche and then told in this pretentious way. I despise it. In the middle of their incomprehensible conversation, there's an announcement on a TV. The announcement says, Moon has left the boy band, and there's no other information about it. This, obviously, throws her for a bit of a loop, but we never really get to see how she feels about what would be and should be a major event in her life. Masterson finally replies to the emails of all the fan fiction that she's been sending him about her and Moon, or Your Name and Moon, looking for his biological mom, and he responds with a coupon for a therapist who specializes in people who are obsessed with celebrities. She decides to go. The therapist tells her, using so many unnecessary, pretentious, insufferable words, that if she was really in love with him, she'd be walking the streets of Seoul looking for him. And she hangs up the phone and she books a one-way ticket, and I have to say that was a baller move, and I appreciated it a lot. On the streets of Seoul, she meets this absolutely random woman who, like everyone, is just as weird as she is, which gives no stakes or weight to the weirdness. And this woman, who goes by O, tells her that the shoes she's wearing, O created the soles for, and that for the past 20 years she's been waiting to find someone on the street who's wearing the soles that she has created for shoes. And she says, "I'm gonna devote myself to helping you get what you want." And the narrator's like, "I want Moon. That's my only dream, is to find him. I came here to find him." O takes her to meet this man who describes himself as Moon's scraps, as if God created Moon and then needed a little bit more, so took part of another human and added that to Moon, and now the guy is the rest of those human bits, and he lives at like a lost and found children's center at an arena. This meetup leads nowhere and it means nothing, but I'm telling you about it because I want to read you some of the things she says about this man. I'll start with the less egregious one that I still hate. The man responded arbitrarily with a look of tenderness. Words. That's just words. That means nothing. This one's crazy. She says, the man's own lips suggested that if he had labia, they'd be parched and aloof. Why would you say that? Why would you say those words in a book? Why would you make me read that? Oh, and the narrator hang out for a while. Again, like, they're both weird, but not in any, like, meaningful or interesting ways. They're just weird to be weird, and the author's not good at writing weird characters. They have this, again, incomprehensible conversation where the narrator says, wouldn't it be better to put thousands of air purifiers on the street and turn them on all at once? It's pointless to live inside a room of good air if that room is inside a world of bad air. This is why I respect chain smokers like myself, O said. I make my own body a room of bad air. Don't you have an air purifier in your room? Yes, she said with a sigh. Being human is like that. It's tricky. This is a really tricky book. Holy shit, so many lines are like this. O enters the narrator into a draw to meet the other boys in the band because Moon's no longer part of the band, and she wins. And she sends the narrator to this pyramid, which is where they work. I don't know. It's like where they train. She meets one of the boys, but she doesn't really care. They give them one direction. They say, don't go to the top room of the pyramid. She doesn't follow the directions. She goes to the top room of the pyramid. A guy in a suit with sunglasses comes to take her away, and he takes her down to the basement. The elevator goes into the ground, and in there is like the boss of the boy band, who is someone who's like been in the book, like someone who you would know about if you knew about the boy band. And they have this fucking random conversation where the boss basically says like, you don't really want to meet Moon. I wish I was you. I wish I was still on the cusp of possibility, still in the doorway, not having entered the room. And then she says, basically, good luck on your search for Moon. And the next thing you know, the narrator is in a car headed to a dementia care center where Moon is staying. It sounds stupid, and that's because it is. It's really fucking stupid. She walks around the dementia care center. How do we end up here? There's 3 patients living here. It's called like the sanctuary. I think there's only really one caregiver. It's not like a full group home, but also it is a group home. I don't really fucking know. I had tapped out at this point. They're walking around forever, meeting these people, knowing that Moon is here, what the book has built up to, her meeting her idol, and yet no tension, not even a wisp of it. And it is dragging this the fuck out, knowing that you're waiting for her to meet Moon, but not understanding that it has not made you care about her meeting Moon. So she does meet him, and he's here like performing for the dementia patients, not as like a boy band member, but he's inhabiting the roles of people that they are stuck on from their lives before dementia. She doesn't have really anything to say to him until she's emboldened by a story that he tells that she thinks is connected to her fan fiction. So she corners him in the kitchen, and she hands him her notebook, and she says, read this. And it is weird as fuck. It is this weird as fuck fan fiction where he has been adopted at birth, but also there's scenes where like the Your Name character, who is obviously her, but also, you know, it's like a fan fiction thing. It's not really, it doesn't have anything to say about fan fiction, whatever. This character like gets into a scooter accident naked, I think, and then uses the pus of her lacerated body to cook the fictional Moon a meal. And he thinks it's so delicious, and it's like a courting technique. And he reads that part and he's like, okay, I think I'm done reading this. She tells him all of the videos and live streams and comments that he ever made to his fans were all directed towards her. He just didn't know it. She says, follow me. We're going to fall in love. There's no pressure. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But if there's something small you want me to do for you, I can do that. You want to take a photo or something? She says, dance for me. And this is where she learns that he no longer has the ability to dance because he danced too hard and it broke his heart, and then he had to have heart surgery and now he can't dance anymore. And she realizes, oh, I only actually really cared about you for the dancing. And then it's over. That's it between them. She goes back to her life with O. She goes back to O's apartment. O shows her this like random fucking like art house film that she made. And then the book ends with O's mom being poisoned by the fumigation that they're doing for the cicadas. That's the book. That's literally the book. I'm not fucking with you. That's the story. Listen, I love a weird book. Do I love a weird book that is patting itself on the back for being weird and only ever really achieving stupidity? No, I don't. I actually forgot to say that between when she gives up on Moon and then actually leaves the sanctuary, she sees him at night. She crawls into his room and she viscerally and in great detail describes his penis hardening. So that was awesome. I'm really glad we got that. All of the fucking imagery in this book is very sexual, and then there's not really all that much sex, actually, and it feels so out of place and strange. Like, listen to this. O's imagination could be cracked open and pulled apart like a cervix for the crowning of such a weirdly limbed perception. Why'd you say that? I think at one point something is described maybe as like rectal, maybe vaginal. I can't 100% remember, but there are many times in the book. Like, why did we talk about if he had labia? What was that? This book far prefers trying to be fake deep and using big words over being intelligible. It's not like achieving communication, which is crazy for a book. Like, listen to this. What I needed were sinuous lines of poetry charged with enigmatic meaning, but not so obscure that he would be forced to request a clarification. What happened to he would have to ask for a clarification? He would have to ask me to clarify. Why does it need to be phrased like that? It's so fucking pretentious. I've never read anything remotely as pretentious as this book. It's truly on another level. Like, every sentence is unfucking believable. Let me find you another one. When Moon danced, he never exhibited control without intimating the threat of disintegration. He began from a position not of strength but of mortality, and this changed his movements. This is even better. Incredulity seemed to be our last, but totally useless line of defense against the monstrous power of an externality. Those are just fucking words. Those mean nothing. Obviously, they do have meaning, but it's not trying to communicate a meaning to me. It's just trying to be fucking pompous, and I hate it. And again, oh my god, with the fake deep Tumblr poetry shit. Despite everything I've been through, I still think that my loneliness is part of some character-building prologue to the joy of togetherness that inevitably awaits me. I'm going to go to Berlin and I'm going to do something catastrophic in front of Esther Yi. Not often do I hate a book so much that I hate its author, but that is the case with this one. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I didn't actually viscerally hate this book. I just thought it was a monumental waste of my fucking time. It just took itself so seriously that it was almost condescending, and actually, at the end of the day, had very little to say about inherently interesting concepts. Obsession, idolization, parasocial relationships. Didn't dive into anything, but then was fake deep on the sentence level. Fucking insufferable. Like I said, the character was nothing. It was trying to do this thing where she's a blank slate in the your name sense, but it didn't achieve that. She was still a character. She was just made incomprehensible in trying to make her not have characteristics. I think what she really was an entity to deliver the author's thoughts and words that weren't really ever that insightful. I do believe that the book was saying more than what I picked up on. I think I missed a lot here because it went in one ear and out the other, but that is because of how the author wrote it in such an opaque way. Even if the writing wasn't absolutely obnoxious, I don't think it would have succeeded at doing anything all that well. It was so bland and so empty. For an obsession story, it's one of the least interesting I have ever read. And people call this disturbing. Reading reviews that said that, if I had gone into this knowing that people considered this disturbing, I would have been pissed the fuck off. Nothing of interest happens in this story. Certainly not the lengths of her obsession, which it never allows us to really understand or grasp. Your name, fanfiction, is the concept, and we never get there. I really can't stand books with a big vocabulary and no skill to back it up. It's like you're trying to hide your very immature, shitty writing while also being on a condescending high horse about it. That gives me secondhand embarrassment like nothing else. I honestly felt like the author is a deeply uncool person and she's got her head up her own fucking ass. I just don't understand why she would choose to write anything like this. And it made me uninterested in anything else she'll ever write, really. And that sucks because this premise is great. And I think that's why my evil book club chose this to torture me with. I think that okay, I have never made anybody read anything as tedious as this story. I pick books that are bad, but they're just stupid. They're not unreadable. But I think they know me really well, and that's why they chose this, because this had potential to be good. It just did nothing, and it did it while fucking condescending to me. Ugh. That's horrible. I looked at this afterwards on Goodreads, and there are way fewer reviews than I was expecting for the amount I've heard about this book, and I think that also goes to show that this was a good book to torture me with, because I've heard a lot of bad things about people hating this book, and it's not like a super hugely popular book. I think it's just a book that fits into my taste, but fails miserably at everything that I should have liked about it. So yeah, I hated it, and I also feel seen. I'm sitting here to review this for you right now because I have left the other 2 books sitting on my fucking nightstand, and it has been torturing me that I don't know what they are. So I'm gonna open what was voted number 2 right now. Last time I did this, the book was upside down, but I have no way of telling which way is right side up. Okay, I'm gonna look at you while I unwrap it, and then I'm gonna show you first. It's a library book, so I'm feeling with my hands to feel where the stickers are. Oh no, this is right side up. Okay. This is it. Is it a shitty romance book? I feel like it's going to be a shitty romance book. Is it like Icebreakers? Ugh! Ice Planet Barbarians. I have absolutely no idea what this is. Oh god. Oh good lord. Oh my god. Fall in love with the out-of-this-world romance between Georgie Caruthers, a human woman, and Vectel, an alien from another planet. In this expanded edition with bonus materials and an exclusive epilogue in print only. Okay, that's my partner's fault. You shouldn't have got me the longer one. What the fuck? You'd think being abducted by aliens would be the worst thing that could happen to me. Oh my god, the summary is written in first person. And you'd be wrong, because now the aliens are having ship trouble, and they've left their cargo of human women, including me, on an ice planet. We are not equipped for life in this desolate winter wasteland. Since I'm the unofficial leader, I head out into the snow to look for help. Why is this written in first person? I find help all right. A big blue-horned alien introduces himself in a rather startling way, do you think, with his penis? Vectel says I'm his mate, his chosen female, and that my presence is the reason his chest is purring. He'll help me and my people survive, but this poses a new problem. If Vectel helps us survive, I'm not sure he's going to want to let me go. This is alien smut. I fucking hate you guys. What the fuck? Okay, first of all, how did you all come up with this? Who was it that has read this book? Actually, I know it was definitely Jada. You should see the kind of shit Jada fucking reads. Jada has read every bad book under the sun. This is brutal. Special fucking edition. Okay. Great. Okay, great. I'm gonna go read this. Awesome! I'm so excited. Fuck. I'll see you later. Well, I am now halfway through Ice Planet Barbarians. This is my first experience ever reading smut, though I'm not someone who's offended at the existence of smut. We at the Frankie Shelf Book Club are titans of the Let Women Goon cause. It's basically our motto. So because this is so outside of my comfort zone and so new to me, it's almost fun to read it. It's like I'm watching my fish in the fish tank, you know? I'm being exposed to new worlds that I never even could have dreamed possible, and not really in good ways. I don't think that this is a good piece of smut. I'm sure there are good pieces of smut out there, though I wouldn't know, and I'm not going to try to find out. Obviously, being not all that interested in this genre does bias how I feel about this book, but I'm trying to be generous with this because it is a new genre for me. I'm trying to think about why the things I don't like in this might be happening here. But let me just tell you what has happened so far. This begins with one of our 2 narrators, Georgie, being abducted by aliens. We know literally nothing else about Georgie when she's kidnapped, and I know very little else now, 120 pages in. We know that she worked at a bank. She has no other life before her abduction. So Georgie goes to sleep at home one night and then wakes up with her body hurting all freaking over, which is so funny to me. Page 2 of an alien smut book, and you're not gonna curse? I know full well now at this point the explicit detail that you're going to get into with the sex scenes, and yet fuck is pushing it too far. Incredible. This also makes liberal use of the word heck and crap. It's amazing. It does swear, but for some reason, sometimes it censors the swearing a little bit. So Georgie realizes that someone has drugged her, and then she thinks to herself, no, not someone, something. She is like really drugged and struggling to come out of it, so we kind of have to forgive her, but she spends a long time thinking about how she's behind a metal grid, and then finally, after paragraphs, she's like, oh my god, wait, I'm trapped in a cage. It absolutely stinks like human shit in there, and there's like 8 other women around her, one of which notices her waking up and starts shushing her, begging her not to scream. This is Liz, and Liz has been abducted for the last 2 weeks. Liz tells her that basically every day the aliens pick up another woman, always a 22-year-old who lives alone with no nearby family or health issues or pregnancy. And also the aliens will violently punish you if you make noise. So the women are pretty sure that they're being sex trafficked by an alien race. And Georgie does see what happens if you make noise when they abduct a new woman, and she wakes up screaming bloody murder. And it's this harrowing scene for Georgie, but the book doesn't go into detailing the violent sexual assault that happens. It's the first 10 pages, and I do appreciate that it doesn't do that. When Georgie sees the woman after this punishment has happened, she describes her by saying that she's about my age, which is so funny because it was just established that all of the women here are 22. So for some reason that I have not been able to figure out, the woman who's been there the longest, named Kira, has had a translator stapled into her ear by the aliens. So far, this is simply just to make things a little easier in the narrative. There's absolutely no reason that I can come up with why the aliens would have fitted her with a translator. Why would they do that? What are their motivations to do this to just one of the women? It makes no sense. But what it does mean is that Kira can hear over the intercom that the aliens are for some reason casting into the room of caged hostages, that they're running late for something, and therefore they're going to detach the cargo hold, the women, and pick them up later so that they can meet their deadlines. Whatever. The women come up with this plan to start screaming to lure the alien guard to open the door, and then they're going to bombard him once he does so that they can get his gun and they can escape, which, like, what you're going to do after that, I don't know. You're literally on a spaceship, but whatever. Georgie sacrifices herself and she starts screaming, and then the guard opens the door and she grabs the shit bucket, because I don't think I mentioned this. They have been all shitting in one shit bucket, the bucket full of human shit, and she tries to splash him with it. Except at that moment, the cargo hold is detached from the rest of the ship and they lose gravity. So she and the alien guard are both absolutely covered in human feces. And I need you to remember that she and the guard are covered in human feces, because I don't think that Ruby Dixon remembers that. So she gets into this zero gravity fight with the alien in which she thinks holy cow to herself, and she ends up beating him to death with the butt of his gun. And when she finishes, Liz says, "You did it. You're a Billy Badass." Now, I have never heard the term Billy Badass before, but I looked it up and it is something. It's not just like a random reference that I didn't understand. It's a term that usually refers to a guy who's like acting like an asshole because he believes that he's like the toughest guy in the room. You know, I think that Ruby Dixon is using it wrong, though I really don't know. I had no idea about this term 12 hours ago. It seems like she's just using it to mean badass, but I think it means something different than that. I think it means someone who's like posturing themselves to be a badass. Okay, so now the women have crash landed on an alien planet. We are 20 pages in, by the way. Georgie says, what the heck happened? In less than 100 pages, we are going to get paragraph after paragraph about an alien's gigantic horse car. So all the women are injured from the crash landing. Georgie has some bruised ribs and what seems like a broken wrist, but she can walk, and everyone else has injured legs. So she becomes the de facto leader, and she's sent off into this alien planet to find help or food or clothing. She puts on the dead guard's clothes, which I need to remind you are covered in human shit, but they are warmer than the like short pajamas that she was wearing. They are covered in human shit, okay? There are brief moments where Dixon remembers this, but she's honestly way more focused on the fact that the alien guard's shoes don't fit Georgie's feet than the fact that she's covered in fecal matter. So Georgie heads off through the rip that has been torn in the side of the cargo hold and into this Arctic wasteland of a planet. to do what she calls find out our bearings, which is fascinating phrasing to me. Like a lot of this book, it's not necessarily wrong, but no one says it like that, you know? You would say to find our bearings. Part of her still wants to believe that she's on Earth, but she looks up and sees that there's two freaking suns. And can I just interject for a moment to say that this book uses the word freaking 14 times? It's like 250 pages long, and it uses freaking 14 times. So she calls down to the women who are still inside what they call a ship, so I will too, but really isn't a ship, it's just a cargo hold. And she says, "It looks like we landed on fucking Hoth, except I see two itty bitty suns and a huge ass moon." "Not Hoth," Liz yells. "It was the sixth planet from its sun, and I don't recall it having a moon." And I think that's a dumb fucking response because Liz, she said, except it has a moon. You're correcting her, but she never said that Hoth had a moon. So they've landed near the top of a mountain, and Georgie can see other mountains in the distance, and she heads for them. She walks for a long time, but the book doesn't really do anything to make it feel like it's a long time or bring much attention to her physical reality of being freezing cold and once again covered in feces. Other than like sometimes it says, "I'm cold. I'm from Florida. This is cold." Like her extremities don't even hurt. I don't feel for her at all. So she sees this stream and it's got these weird tree bamboo-like stalks growing out of it and it's steaming. She goes to the bank and she grabs one of the stalks and it's warm. And she thinks to herself, that's a good sign that the water is warm too. As if it's not literally letting off steam. She bends down close to the water and she realizes that the thing she's grabbed onto is actually attached to the face of a giant alien fish creature, which almost grabs her, but she manages to run away. She starts running and like, I know she's scared. I know she's on an alien planet. So how much can I really judge her reactions? But like, she is meant to be freezing cold and on the brink of starvation. At least run with or against the stream, not directly away from it, right? It is your only resource at this point. So she gets away and she thinks to herself, holy ... fuck. I just nearly got eaten by an alien fish ... thing. And I just need to tell you that we are 34 pages into this book, and those are the 24th and 25th instances of ... It is actually bananas how often she uses ellipses. I searched through a digital edition and there are almost 150 of them in this 250-page book. That is like more than once every 2 pages, is it not? It's actually fucking crazy. And also they're meant to convey something different every single time. As she's running away, she gets scooped up in this snare and she's left dangling a foot off the ground and she thinks to herself, down there, my club/gun. And I'm not even picking on using slash as a word here, club-/-gun, which is how it's formatted. I'm picking on the question, which is a pattern that I have been endlessly noticing in this book, and it's starting to fucking grate on me. It's just this writing quirk where it will ask a question and then answer it. And that does sound so innocent, but when it's this persistent, it becomes really irritating. Like, why couldn't you just phrase that normally? This pattern is even in the Goodreads summary for the book. It says, and the only native inhabitant I've met, he's big, horned, blue, and really, really has a thing for me. Why couldn't it say the only inhabitant I've met is big, horned, blue, and really, really has a thing for me? Why does it need to make it a question? It's in the first paragraph of the book, literally sentence 2. If someone would have told me that little green men were hanging around Earth in flying saucers just waiting to abduct people, I would have told them they were crazy. And then immediately again. But that was yesterday. Today's a very different story. That's so fucking stupid. This certainly isn't a crime on its own, but to use this pattern over and over again when it's totally unnecessary just gets annoying for your readers. Same with the use of ellipses. It's fine if it's used sparingly or deliberately, but when it's so overused, it feels like you don't know how to do anything else. Like you can't emphasize without using an ellipses. You can't alternate your sentence structure without using unnecessary questions. And it is indicative of a larger problem with this book, which is just simply a lack of deliberation and a lack of care. I think there are 20 books in this series, and I'm pretty sure 7 of them were released in 2016. That could be wrong. My partner just told me that, and I did not fact check it. But to have 20 books in a series over 10 years and also be writing other series, you're just probably not doing a very good job. And she's not. Okay, so Georgie is hanging from this trap. All the blood is rushing to her head and she's about to pass out. But right before she does, a giant blue humanoid, of course, alien comes towards her. And then she passes out before he gets there. And we switch to our second narrator's perspective. And this is Vectel. So Vectel releases her unconscious body from the trap with curiosity. And he's then surprised to feel his Kui, Khui, resonate in his chest, which basically means that Georgie is his mate. The Qui thing has not been fully explained to me yet, but it's like his soul and his sexuality and his desire, and also what keeps him warm in the cold environment. And also it's something that acts without his input and seems to have wisdom beyond him, whatever that means. So Vectel takes Georgie's body into a cave and warms her up, and then starts eating her out while she's unconscious. And of course, she wakes up and is frightened of this giant 7-foot tall, blue skinned monster alien slurping her up. But also, it feels really good. She pushes him away and he persists. But that persistence, that's the right thing for her because it feels really good. I'm obviously never really going to be into the dubious consent stuff, and I don't feel like this scene is necessary in the development of the character's relationship or the movement of the plot. I do think it's kind of interesting though, as like, not to sound like a total fucking asshole, but like a sociological phenomenon. People way smarter than me were talking about this in the comment section of my Verity review, that Colleen Hoover, but also like romance and smut authors generally, have this tendency to talk about sex like this. Because there's so much repression surrounding sex and desire, particularly for women, and especially if you're coming from a religious background, that even if you're liberated enough to be writing smut, you might still have some deep-seated feelings that will lead you to write sex as something that is enacted upon the women in your story, something that happens to them, because that carries less shame than wanting it or seeking it out or initiating it yourself. But then it also creates scenes where sexual assault just happens and the author needs to write themselves out of that corner, and we as the readers need to accept it as being something other than assault. I think that it is a very fascinating effect of like Puritanism, and now that it's been pointed out to me, I find it really hard not to notice it everywhere. Though, unlike Verity, this book only seems to lean into that the one time at the beginning here, so maybe my armchair psychoanalysis is kind of like all for naught. So Georgie warms up to the oral sex that is being enacted upon her, and then she orgasms, and then she can tell that he wants to take it to the next step. But she doesn't want that, and she can't communicate with him, so she kicks him in the chest, and it's like kicking iron. And when she looks up at his face, he is furious. And arbitrarily, this is where part 1 ends. Part 2 begins, as you might expect, with Vectel's perspective, because this is an alternating perspectives book, in the same moment. There was no reason for it to be a new part. Nothing more has changed than it usually does from chapter to chapter. So Vectel isn't actually mad. He's just confused that this creature who his Qui is telling him is his forever mate doesn't seem to want to mate with him. But then, when she flinches away from his touch, he does get mad, and he like instinctively snarls. This is something that he does often, and I find it so interesting. There's this really strange conflict with Vectel's character, where we get his perspective, and his internal narration is very sophisticated. Like at one point he says, "Not familiar with quilled beasts, are you?" And he often drops contractions, but then from Georgie's perspective, and also just like the way he is very instinct driven and animalistic. And I feel like those things clash so intensely that it must be deliberate. That is a very alien characterization to me. I don't really understand him at all. So the two of them start talking at each other, except obviously they don't have a shared language because they are both aliens to each other. They do manage to come up with enough shared gestures that they can communicate somewhat, to a point where it's like a mildly frustrating hurdle, but it doesn't completely hold them back. I think it's meant to be like, look at how good their sex is, just innately, without any of this tired, complex communication bullshit, which, like, sure, girl. If that's what gets you off, go for it. I'm not gonna judge you. Communication is hard. Wouldn't it be great if we could just never do it? It's not really how the world works, but that's why we're on an alien planet. They manage to teach each other their names, though they both kind of struggle with pronunciation, and Vectel is basically like, I'll do anything to protect her. She's mine. I will give her a Qui, which I have to assume means impregnate her. He says that having a Qui keeps you alive, and without it, Georgie will never survive on this planet. Back to Georgie's perspective, and she's kind of just ogling him. Now, Georgie never really feels anything other than sexual urges. She's not like afraid really at all. She might sometimes say, I'm scared, or this is a frightening situation, but it certainly doesn't come through to you in the writing. There is so much focus here on the differences between their two bodies, and there will continue to be, I assume, for the rest of the book, at least until the point I'm at. A lot, and I mean a lot of it is, he's so big and strong, and I'm so weak and fragile, because, like, let's be so real, this is the most boring kind of alien. He's incredibly humanoid. He's just, like, human adjacent. So they have to be like, oh my god, he's big, he's 7 feet tall. Give me a book about a woman stuck on an alien planet trying to get off with a blob of amorphous goo. You know what I mean? So instead she's looking at like his horns and his fangs and his tail and his big, truly human-shaped body. Like maybe he only has 4 fingers, but he's just a big, tall dude with blue skin. I just want this to be a bit freakier. I'm sorry. She's also looking at like the ridges all over his body. He has these like bumps on his forehead, and she's thinking to herself, okay, I could probably get down with this. There's not really any warming up to the idea of the beast. She is down to fuck like truly instantly. But right now she's more focused on how hungry she is. When she mimes this to him, he starts undressing and she says, "I hope you didn't mistake my growling stomach for nookie time." Nookie? Nookie? That's not a word that I was familiar with before this book. And I hate it with everything in my heart. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. That's so horrible. Who came up with that? Have we stoned them to death yet? He's actually undressing because he has some food stored on his person, and as hungry as she is, she can't stomach it, so they agree through gesture to go hunting in the morning. She falls asleep very easily and comfortably on this alien planet with this alien man who she just woke up to assaulting her, and then she wakes up in the morning and she asks again about food because she's on the brink of starvation, and she thinks, "Every inch of me feels like a mooch for finding a guy and then demanding he feed me," which is absolutely fucking hilarious. You are on an alien planet. This is a 7-foot tall, blue-skinned man with a tail and fangs and horns, and yet you are still so tied down to the human social obligations of dating that you feel like a mooch for asking to be fed. You are on an alien planet having sex with an alien. Throw away social convention. Free yourself. So they go out to hunt with her riding piggyback, which is awesome, and she's trying to direct him towards the crash site to go rescue the other women, but he's like, "No, food is this way." And she thinks to herself, won't it be better to show up not empty-handed? Which is a very, very clunky use of a double negative. But also, like, babe, no. The women in there think that you have died. Go back and let them know that you're okay and that help is coming. You told them not to wait for you if you weren't back within the day. It's now been 24 hours. They're going to start going out into the snow and fucking freezing to death. So she goes with the beast because of course she does. He kills some alien creatures for her and she eats them. The pacing in this book is wild because things happen, but they happen so fucking slowly. And I think that must be part of smut, right? Like if you're getting yourself worked up off of literature, then you're probably looking for that like crazy slow burn. You must really want to be able to like build up this image of what's happening in your head. But I personally am not really good at doing that. So it just feels really, really slow to me. The first 30 or whatever pages before she meets Vectel were so fast, everything happened, and it needed to be dragged out more to actually get a feel for what's going on and to be able to put yourself in Georgie's shoes. And then now that Vectel's here, it's painstaking. I will relay something to you in one sentence that will take 4 to 5 pages to get through. So the two of them come across one of these warm streams and he shows her how to use a crushed up berry to get the fish creatures to scatter because they don't like the smell of the juice. And also, conveniently, the berries are an effective soap. And that's about the extent of the world building that we have got so far. I don't think that this book would please an audience of science fiction or fantasy enjoyers at all. So the two of them undress and they soap each other up in this warm stream for literally over 10 pages, though I can't really complain because she is finally no longer covered in human shit. Then she starts asking him to take her up the mountain so that she can get back to the women that she left behind. And it says, his brows draw together and he gives a shake of his head indicating that no, he's not taking me there. The most redundant thing I've ever heard in my fucking life. He shakes his head no to indicate no. They kind of argue as much as they can without a shared language for 2 pages, and then she starts being like, I'll kiss you if you take me up the mountain. And then he reaches down and drags his fingers over her folds. And you're like, oh my God, I forgot they were butt naked this whole time. It's genuinely so shocking. Things in this book just take so long to fucking happen that you forget about what is going on, which I think must be bad smut, right? I'm sure other people do it better. Again, I will not be finding out. Also, it calls her vagina her folds way too many times for my comfort, like at least 5 so far. Georgie thinks that they've agreed to go up the mountain, but not long after they start their trek, Vectel takes her into a hunting cave and she throws a tantrum because she wants to go up the mountain, but he indicates that she's too cold and they need to warm up first. So she storms off and then falls down a crevasse, which ends up being filled with hostile creatures. She is fine. This is just Vectel's moment to show how protective he is of his mate, to throw himself in behind her, be giant and strong and tough and scary and not let anything put her in harm's way in this unfamiliar land. It really is nothing beyond that. He rescues her, he takes her back to the cave, and she's miserable and she's thinking about how much she hates this planet and how she resents him for being warm in just a tank top and leggings, which is so fucking funny to imagine that he's been wearing like he's in his Lulus this whole time. Back with Vectel's perspective, he's upset at how helpless Georgie is, which is a dynamic for sure. It won't stop emphasizing how tiny and soft and fragile she is and how helpless she is without his role as her protector. I mean, no one is surprised by this. It's like the most basic straight fantasy of all time. Does it still feel a little tired? Yes. So the two of them sit in the cave and warm up and try to teach each other words in their respective languages, which quickly turns into exploring each other's bodies, which quickly turns into a very, very prolonged sex scene. It starts out before they actually start. He says, "Though my horns do not have much feeling, her breasts are close to my face," which is awesome. And then she starts rubbing his ridges, the ridges that he has all over himself, and that causes him to get rock fucking hard. And then he thinks, I can't take any more of this. She may be in control now, touching and exploring my body, touching my ridges, but if she keeps doing that, I'm gonna throw her down on the furs and fuck her until she screams, which is just kind of gross, and I think also a deviation away from the character of Vectel that we've been getting to know outside of the very first introduction we got to him. So he ends up pushing her away, and it switches to Georgie's point of view, who of course does that question thing that I've been complaining about, and that I myself just did. This book is getting into my fucking brain. She says, "So to be pushed away now, when we're learning about each other, it hurts my feelings." Why could it not say, "So to be pushed away now when we're learning about each other hurts my feelings"? I don't understand. Literally like a page later, she says, "The more noble he tries to be about things, the friskier I get." And that one doesn't even need to be rephrased. There should just be a comma there. Like the question mark just shouldn't be there. So there's like a ton of back and forth where he doesn't want to do anything or push anything too far to respect her, and she wants to and wants to do more, but the more she pushes, the more he pulls away, until finally he relents and they start doing it, and it is pages and pages, of course, of raunchy-ish sex. I know you probably want me to get into it, but it's truly not that interesting. At least to me, I don't, and I never really have given a fuck about a sex scene unless it's doing something other than being a sex scene. She calls his girth pretty freaking impressive, which is such a funny sentence. Why you're censoring yourself when that is the subject matter. She also keeps calling being wet her juices, which is visceral, if nothing else. Perhaps too visceral. Perhaps a bit too much. I will commend this book for focusing on the pleasure of the woman in the pairing. I guess that's probably pretty common in smut, which is written and read largely by women, but it's so uncommon in the way we often talk about heterosexual intercourse that I was pleasantly surprised with how much her needs took priority. I thought it was absolutely fucking hilarious that she had noticed earlier when they were bathing this knob that looked like a knuckle right above his bits, and then it turns out that it's just because he's a rabbit toy. He's a rabbit toy that's also a strong protective man. Honestly, good for her. And also here, I liked when she says, "I've had sex before, and oral sex several times," because even though I'm sure that's true of Georgie's character, the way she said it makes it sound like a bald-faced lie, and that's really fucking funny. So this scene is very long and detailed in that it tells us every single touch that happens between the two of them, but it didn't really seem that effective to me. I don't think it does a good job of really evoking how this feels for Georgie. And it doesn't really try to until the very end, and then it becomes very obvious that the author isn't all that capable of describing a woman's orgasm. It just feels like for how long this takes to describe, it could have been more interesting. Back to Vectel's perspective after they're done, which thank God it didn't go through it again from his point of view, because it was like truly 15 pages. He's like, "At long last, I have claimed my mate. She's of course going to be pregnant with an alien baby, right? Like, it's been telegraphed very clearly from the start." Vectel goes to check the traps and get some food for them, dinner and a show, and he finds the body of a human woman barefoot in the snow. When he takes Georgie to it, she of course demands that they go back to the ship, and it's kind of funny that while she was having alien sex, and like not even insane alien sex, basically just human sex, except he has a knob and enjoys pleasing her, while she was doing that, the women that she was meant to be scouting for have been dying, have been freezing to death in the snow. This is fascinating because there is so little to Georgie's character other than those two choices that she has made, to be the scout and then to turn her back on the women in favor of the alien. Georgie has to be this blank slate, right? That's part of the genre, and I know that. I know that you need to be able to project yourself onto her if you're getting your rocks off to this. So to have her only characteristics be selflessness and then also selfishness is so strange. It's like playing both sides, but in doing so, making her unrelatable to each one. I've also found that her lack of characterization is really impacting how I feel about the story, because there is no Georgie. Georgie is an absence where the reader is supposed to insert themselves. And because I don't really give a fuck about the alien sex, I actually am kind of dreading it now, knowing how long and slow it's going to be when it comes. It means that I don't know what I want to happen in this story. Like, you would think that there should be this push-pull between her desire to go back home and her essential need for Vectel, but there really isn't. Georgie doesn't want anything. Georgie has no motivations beyond moving from one second to the next. She doesn't have an established home that she wants to get back to because her character only exists within this story. And I honestly feel pretty similarly with Vectel. I don't really understand either of these characters as having an origin. And this is making me both not care what happens in this story, but also be kind of interested in what's going to happen in this story because I can't come up with a narrative in my mind that I would ever care about. And I want to see if that stays true. Are they going to return to Vectel's implied society together? Are the aliens going to come back for the other women? Is she trying to get back to Earth after being abducted? Does she care? Do I? Why should I? Will it make me? These are my questions that I am pondering while I just kind of take in the experience of this book. I am going to go finish it because I need to get it out of my head. I can truly feel it changing my brain chemistry in a way that is scaring me. I will see you in 100 and something pages. Wish me luck. All right, I have finished Ice Planet Barbarians a little quicker than I was anticipating I was going to because I didn't realize just how much of this edition is bonus content. There is a bonus epilogue called Georgie Goes Hunting. There's also a bonus novella that wraps up Georgie and Vectel's story. I could not care less about these things. Argue with the wall. I'm not reading them. I've had enough. So let's talk about what happens in the second half of this book. Georgie and Vectel head to the ship where she abandoned these women that she had spent the last 2 weeks kidnapped with and shitting in front of. They get there and the women are all like, "Oh my god, we thought you were dead." Georgie says, "Sorry, I kind of got caught up with something." But Vectel is so touchy and possessive that the women very quickly realize what that means. But because he's brought them food and fire and warm clothing, they warm up to him. One of the women says, "I'll blow him if he actually builds us a fire," and this makes Georgie feel pissed off at everyone, even though they have been slowly freezing and starving to death while she frolicked around with her blue alien boyfriend. She's like, "Crap." She does say crap. "I'm jealous. That must mean I really like him." Then we switch to Vectel, who's basically like, "I'm gonna bring this group of fertile women to my involuntarily celibate tribe of unmated males, and they're going to help us continue our race. But mostly, I'm just doing it because I want my homies to get some." Okay, so Kira still has that translator stapled to her ear, and she can translate whatever Vectel says, but for some reason, they don't really use this to communicate anything to each other. Communication has definitely been a barrier that both of them have experienced in this relationship, and they both have important information that you'd think they would want to share with each other, and yet they kind of just don't. Obviously, it could only ever go one way. Kira's translator only translates Vectel. She doesn't actually speak the language, but still, they should be trying to say something to each other, right? Vectel goes out looking for firewood, and Georgie thinks to herself, "I'm just so freaking happy at the moment. Vectel's getting us fire and food, and all the girls are alive, but they aren't. You just found Dominique's dead body." When Vectel gets back, Liz points out how possessive he is, and Georgie thinks, "Yeah, I don't hate it though. I actually kind of like it." And that's about as much of an inner world as we will ever get from Georgie. That is also about as much disbelief or shock or pushback that we will get from the other women regarding Georgie's relationship with this alien man. They really do not give a fuck, which I think is a missed opportunity to explore how this very untraditional relationship feels in the light of day through other people's perspectives when the two of them have been so insularly wrapped up with each other. But I understand that it couldn't really do that because of the path that this story will end up taking. You would, however, expect some pushback that night when Vectel and Georgie shamelessly start going at it in the same room as everyone else, but literally they kind of just whisper to each other, and then the lovers do their thing. This scene is actually uncomfortable for multiple reasons. It's told from Vectel's perspective, and he's really pushing for them to do it, to take it all the way, and he keeps thinking about how Georgie is teasing him, and he requires more than what she's giving, and finally, she says no, and he growls in response, because she's saying no when his quee is purring. This book has created a situation in which blue balls are a real phenomenon. The two of them rush off in the morning to start their journey back to Vectel's society so that he can grab some eligible bachelors to help bring all the women back to his home and fit them with the quee that he won't stop talking about. But they also have another urgent purpose in heading out early in the morning, and that is to find somewhere private so that they can boink. Midway between the crash site and Vectel's tribal home is a cave that Vectel calls the Elder's Cave, which is a little bit different than the other caves. It has very uniform, smooth, ice-covered walls. But the strangeness of this cave doesn't really register to Georgie because she has something else on the mind, and that's having sex. And they do have sex before Georgie notices that the cave they're in has blinking lights on the other side of the ice. That this cave is a spaceship. The two of them melt the ice on the walls with a stick that Vectel lights on fire with the fire that they have going, and that Georgie calls like a makeshift crappy torch, as if it's not exactly a makeshift crappy torch. And once the spaceship walls are revealed, they kind of just like press a button and it boots to life, and this robotic voice starts talking to them. And in reaction to this disembodied voice, Vectel pulls out a knife and starts kind of like aggressively trying to protect Georgie. And Georgie thinks, right, my big blue barbarian probably wouldn't know a spaceship if it bit him on his big ridge-covered nose. He wears leather, eats raw meat, and hunts with slings and bone knives. Big guy's probably never heard of a space heater, much less a spaceship. And this is the point in the book where my caution at this story that follows this small, fragile white woman coming to an unfamiliar to her but inhabited land and falling in love with a man from a primitive hunter-gatherer society turned from caution into full-on side-eyeing. I mean, this is kind of just the myth of the noble savage in a new form, right? This man who has been uncorrupted by civilization and reacts out of aggression when he's exposed to it. This is a very old and racist trope, particularly in romance fiction, just dressed up in leggings and a tank top in this book. Okay, so the voice turns out to be the most convenient thing to ever happen ever, and this entire scene I was giggling because what the fucking hell? This voice is like the spaceship's artificial intelligence, and it knows every language across the universe, and it also knows the history of literally everything that's ever happened. It is so awesome, and it gets better, but I'm saving the best part for you. So the voice tells Georgie that Vectel's species isn't originally from this planet, and they have been modified to be able to sustain life here. That 287 years ago, members of his species crash-landed on this planet, and they were stranded, and they were going to die because of this nitrogen-like element in the atmosphere, and then they got this symbiont, the Qui, which allows them to sustain life. It like filters out this nitrogen element. It tells her that she will die within just a couple days if she does not also have a Qui. She thinks, oh my God, I either get a tapeworm or I die. And it's like, that doesn't really seem like a difficult choice to me. I feel like it's pretty clear what one you should do. She asks the voice if she can remove the Qui once she goes back home to Earth. And the voice tells her that once it has been implanted, the Qui and the host are mutually dependent on each other. And Georgie takes this to mean that if she gets the Qui, she can never leave this planet. She can never return to Earth. But that isn't what the voice said. It just becomes the truth, though. Georgie has just read this into what the voice has said, and now it's like, it's either we take the Qui and we live here forever, and we can never go back to Earth, or we try to get back to Earth. There cannot be a middle ground in the choice that they have to make about whether they're going to stay here or leave. I just don't understand why the voice couldn't have just told her that the Qui can only survive on this planet. Like, that truly would have been so easy. After story time comes the funniest part of this spaceship voice, which is that it tells her it can perform a one-time linguistic upload. Yep, it just puts his language into her brain, and now they can communicate. Once again, though, the two of them don't talk about anything or even really express much excitement at now having a shared language. They move on from this unbelievably fast to talking now about the conflict of the book, whether or not Georgie is going to get a Qui and stay on this planet or somehow go back to Earth, which she's just learned is 5.8 million light years away. Vectel is, of course, confused and upset when she tells him that she might not want a Qui, and even if she did want a Qui, she can't make that choice for the other women. This frustrated me for almost the entire remainder of the book, because Georgie has just decided that the women have to choose what to do as a group together. And it's also very annoying because the choice has very clearly already been made for them, so like, what is all this moping about for? I don't know. When Georgie expresses this to Vectel, he's like, wait, but then what about all of my tribesmen who have no mates? They'll never get to know this pleasure. Which just feels fucking icky. Back with Georgie, she talks about how she feels like if she were making an individual choice, it would be easy, that she would want to stay here. But she can't do that because the humans need to make a decision together. This is truly an imagined conflict. This is nothing. You made this issue up in your head. It's so fucking annoying because this non-issue becomes the driving force of the story and the characters and their relationship. And of course, there's never an acknowledgement that this is not actually an issue, that this is something that she has created. Vectel and Georgie continue on their way to Vectel's tribe, where he is the chief. They do use the language chief. There's a lot in here that's just like, sometimes it's right there and sometimes it's just under the surface with the anti-indigenous racism. When they get back to where his tribe lives in this cave, they run into another hunter who's kind of like ogling Georgie and like licking his lips. But Vectel keeps his hand on Georgie and she thinks to herself, okay, I kinda adore that. So the three of them head inside this cave system where Vectel's people live, and he gives them this rousing little speech about how there's a whole bunch of other available women for the single men in the tribe to scoop up if their queen so desires. And Georgie tries to be like, actually, on Earth, like, women have autonomy. And he's like, yes, maybe we will try to do that too. But basically the idea is, if the queen says it, it's gospel. And you don't get a choice. They make their way back to Vectel's room in the cave, and she comments on it being warm, which pissed me off because the robot voice in the spaceship just told her that his species' most comfortable temperature is 3 degrees, and her species is 22 degrees. So if it's warm and cozy in here to you, Georgie, he's on the brink of heat stroke. Vectel leaves her alone with the community's healer because her wrist has been broken this whole time. It hasn't really been that important, and she comments on how she's relieved that the healer isn't rubbing crystals or packing mud on her. And that turned the side-eyeing from before into outright distaste. That is simply anti-Indigenous racism with a blue alien creature as a proxy. She had absolutely no need to say that. It's meant to be, I think, a joke. The healer doesn't end up doing much for her because she doesn't have a queen. We then switch over to Vectel, who is rallying up his community's single men to come on this crusade for them to get some women to own and impregnate. It's this really strange thing where these men are kind of like incel adjacent. Like, they are involuntarily celibate and depicted as like a horned up group of guys with no release, but they don't really have that incel ideology that I think is important, though they do certainly have some of it. They have this idea that they deserve or are owed a mate. And it's frightening. When Vectel returns to his room where Georgie is, they have a conversation where he talks about how excited he is for their kit. They have shared a language for a full day now. And she's like, what's that? And he's like, what do you mean? It's the baby inside you. And she's like, oh my God, you're right. I'm late. You impregnated me. And he's like, of course I impregnated you. The queen only resonates with someone who you can mate with and have a baby with. First of all, she's aware that she's pregnant literally 2 days after having sex. Also, what? I mean, like, of course we all saw this coming. I was looking at reviews and I saw that this series generally is like breeding kink central. I'm more saying what to the enforced impregnation of this woman. He had sex with her knowing that this would be the result, and we're really supposed to be like, oh, this is romantic. She's upset for truly 3 sentences, and then she's like, it's hard to be upset when the guy you're upset at loves you so much. What the fuck? She truly doesn't have any feelings about being pregnant with this alien's half-human, half-alien child. She has other things on her mind, I guess. They're heading back to get the group of women with a group of drooling, rock-hard men coming along with them. They're bringing enough supplies to pick up all 5 of the other women, but there's actually 11 because this whole time there have been 6 women locked in like hibernation chambers in this cage that they were trapped in. And for some reason, Georgie's like, I'm not going to tell him that. I'm going to save that bombshell for later. No idea why. It truly makes no sense. Obviously, that fact would change their approach, their plan, the amount of supplies that they brought, how many men came with them on this very difficult trek. So they get to the women and the men kind of just like stare wide-eyed at them and hover over them and generally won't take no for an answer unless it's coming from Vectel, and even then they're hesitant. But on Georgie's orders, Vectel drags them out to hunt for more food while Georgie goes over the options with these women. Now, like I said before, the choice has been made for them. They don't really have options. They're saying, like, we can either wait here for the other aliens to come pick us up and probably die in the process because the atmosphere is killing us and we'll only have a few days left. And also, who knows what the other aliens who treated us absolutely horribly have planned for us, or we could accept the Quee and live. I wonder what choice we're gonna make. Of course, everyone is really on board for the Quee thing and is fine with being forever paired with one of these guys without their input or control. In this conversation as well, Georgie's like, did I mention that some of them learned English in the old ship on the way over? Which, like, the men had been around the women for 2 hours at that point. It made it very clear that they had been eating and drooling over them and hovering over them for 2 hours. How did that not come up one single time? Georgie tells Vectel that her and the other women have decided to stay, and this of course means that he gets to keep having sex with her, so he is overjoyed at the prospect. Then she breaks the news that there are 6 more women, and he says, she tells me this incredible story about being kidnapped from her home planet. They have shared a language for 2 days, and none of her origin came up at all? You're telling me it only comes up now when it's like very, very, very directly relevant? I mean, it's been relevant the whole time. He has wondered, what is this woman doing on this planet? Her species doesn't fit here. He never asked. It's insane. Vectel, of course, isn't angry at this secret that she's been keeping from him. To him, it's like Christmas. 6 more objects to bring back to his tribe for mating. The men are on the outside of the cargo hold and they're like freaking out, holding onto their crotches, asking when they can come in and find their mates. And Vectel says, soon, y'all. We gotta let the women warm up to this idea. And one of the guys is like, it's really hard to be patient when we know that there are mateable women so close by. And I don't think that we are necessarily meant to understand that as a threat to these women. Honestly, I don't know how we're supposed to take it, but it is super fucking weird. So after a little bit, everyone, the women and the men, they all go out to hunt the beast that they harvest the Kui from in a fight scene absolutely devoid of any tension whatsoever, and also way less detailed than every other scene in the book, despite the fact that it is the climax of the narrative. Georgie is the first to accept her Kui, and she struggles internally with the concept of cutting open her neck and putting a little worm inside, but then she does it, and she passes out, but when she wakes up, she's never felt better. This is the best thing she ever could have done. She has no regrets. Despite it having been explained to her many times that the Kui will keep her warm, when she wakes up, she says, I'm warm? And Vectel's like, yeah, the Kui will keep you warm. I promise you, this has been said 15 times in the book so far. Not only is she warm, though, she is also a new kind of horny. And Vectel says, I can smell your need, mate, which just read to me as Australian. I know he's trying to say that, like, we're mates. I can smell your need, mate. Georgie kind of looks around at the other women who are all in various stages of accepting their Kui and coming back into consciousness, and she's like, wait, one of them is missing. And Vectel tells her that Rahosh, the man that they ran into outside of the camp who was like really ogling her, he ran off with one of the women. And though Vectel says he will have to answer to his tribe, it is treated as like a kind of funny haha moment. Georgie even thinks to herself, I kind of feel bad for him. This dude who just stole an unconscious woman. I also kind of felt like with this particular woman who Rahosh steals, it's kind of set up as her deserving it. She is described by Vectel as being mouthy and stubborn because she has an iota of personality and free will. I thought that was a really fucking gross note to kind of end the book on, though of course it's not the very last thing to happen. The very last thing that happens is that Vectel and Georgie go find a rock just a little ways off from the others, and they have really intense Kui sex. And they watch as the spaceship that was coming to pick up the women lands and then takes back off again when it doesn't find them. And that is the end of the main story of the first of 22 books, Ice Planet Barbarians, which is all I will be reading, except of course I read the author's note because I love an author's note and I needed a peek inside this author's brain. So in this author's note, she talks about loving science fiction, which was nearly unbelievable to me considering how absolutely lacking the world building was in this story. But she says she hates the execution of science fiction romance because often the male lead is cruel, and she wanted to write something a little bit sweeter, like, you know, introducing your male lead with non-consensual oral sex. Sweet. It's really sweet. She also addresses in the author's note something that I commended her for in the beginning, which was to not include the details of a sexual assault scene less than 10 pages into the book. That was actually an edit that she made after she got complaints about how unnecessarily violent it was. So I take that back, I guess. Her change also didn't really fix much, considering that the side character who experiences this is the one that dies in the snow, and the story is that she lost her will to live and ran into the snow, and all the women are kind of like, it was for the best, which is just like such a kind and empathetic portrayal, isn't it? So obviously, we all know this. Ice Planet Barbarians is bad. This is not just a bad book, but I think this is bad erotica. I think the Gooners deserve good erotica, and they're not going to find it here. Like I said earlier, there are 22 books in this series over what I said before was 10 years, but is actually 6. Pumping out 22 books in 6 years almost certainly guarantees that they're not going to be very good. And it's even worse than that because Ruby Dixon has multiple other series that she was writing and releasing over the 6 years that this series was being published. So of course, none of these are going to be given any amount of thought or care. I highly doubt that much editing was done at all besides some very light proofreading, and I will say that you can feel that these were written very quickly and with almost no thought, but they don't feel all that poorly edited. Developmentally edited, that shit is bad. They don't feel all that poorly proofread. I have encountered worse many a time. I think Dixon does understand English. That is my praise. One of my biggest complaints here is that I think this book should have been freakier. He is literally an alien creature, but it's like pretty basic heterosexual intercourse the entire time. Almost all of the differences between their bodies mean nothing in practice. I couldn't tell if this book was a little self-conscious in the way that it doesn't go all the way with the weirdness, or if it felt like it was doing something crazy just because the premise is alien on human, and it couldn't even imagine a world freakier than that, simply just freakier than blue alien and human. With how heavily it leans into specifically like the blue skin thing, I tend to believe the latter. Like the dedication is to everyone who's been telling their friends about the blue alien books. Doesn't that sound like, ooh, look at us, we're in this little club and we're all so freaky because it's a man with blue skin? And I know y'all are going to come for me for this, but it's so normal. It is essentially just straight human sex. You could have done anything. You could have done literally anything. Instead, it is so dull. I thought this book was weird as fuck with the non-consensual sex, the objectification of women who are treated as things without autonomy who exist solely to be impregnated, and like the anti-indigenous racism with the noble savage narrative, etc., etc. None of these characters made any sense to me, and they had truly no development. Their interiors were simply thinking about the next time they were going to do it. I could not care if they lived or died. I was sort of having fun reading this in the beginning as like a total outsider, but it's honestly not even that entertaining. I breathed a sigh of relief when this finished sooner than I was expecting it to. I would love to see a breakdown of all of the plot holes in this story because I know I missed many because of how repetitive the writing style is. The details were often just like rolling off of me and I found it hard to take them all in. But even with what I did internalize, I know that this was damn near incoherent. I learned in the author's note that this series blew up on TikTok, and I would also be so curious to know why, but my guess is that it's just the tagline. Like, oh my god, crazy blue aliens. Let's use our imaginations. We can dream bigger than this. Now, of course, I knew that my evil book club was probably going to make me read a piece of smut, and I like that they went with a slightly weirder one, even though I'm disappointed with how weird it actually ended up being. I'm just really hoping that the next book isn't also smut. I am tired. So this book has been sitting on my bedside table for the past little while, and it is haunting me. Something that I know about this is that my partner Sammy had to go and purchase this because the waitlist at the library was too long. That obviously tells me that it's a relatively popular book. Here are my guesses. Okay, obviously maybe Colleen Hoover. Could be It Ends With Us. Could be Layla. I'm thinking maybe the Step Siblings one. I've heard about that one. Credence or something like that. I am also hoping that it's not Akatar, though I think Akatar is slightly chunkier than this book is. It could be Icebreakers, the hockey romance. I don't know why I'm expecting that. I think I already guessed that in this video. It could be like 50 Shades or some horrible celebrity's memoir. I am frightened. I'm going to open it now. I'm going to show you first. I'm not looking. I don't feel a sticker on it. I'm not looking at it. I was right. You little shits. I don't want to read the hockey romance. Ew, I spent money on this. Oh my god, it was $24.99. I don't know how Sammy has kept a straight face with the amount of times that I've said I'm pretty sure it's going to be Icebreakers. It's not even called Icebreakers, it's called Icebreaker. He's the one thing she couldn't plan for. Anastasia Allen has worked her entire life for a shot at Team USA. It looks like everything is going according to plan when she gets a full scholarship to the University of California, Maple Hills, random, and lands a place on their competitive figure skating team. Why Maple Hills? Nothing will stand in her way, not even the captain of the hockey team, Nate Hawkins. Nate's focus as team captain is on keeping his team on the ice, which is tricky when a facilities mishap means they're forced to share a rink with the figure skating team, including Anastasia, who clearly can't stand him. But when Anastasia's skating partner faces an uncertain future, she may have to look to Nate to take her shot. Sparks fly, but Anastasia isn't worried, because she could never like a hockey player, right? Okay, first and foremost, it offends me that this is not set in Canada. I just assumed that it was. Also, this book is so long. This looks like it's 400 pages. This is over 400 pages, you guys. This is the number one thing that you voted? I'm going to scrap the whole video. I really don't want to read this. Not after I had to read the Ice Planet Barbarians. Now you're just making me read just like a bad romance book. I guess I kind of deserve it. Okay. Cool. Okay, cool. No, that's good. That's good. That's good. I'm gonna start reading that. That's good. I'll see you when I've read it. I'm so happy. Okay, bye. I just want to say that I just realized that obviously it wasn't going to have a fucking library tag on it because I own it. I feel like an idiot for that. I was looking for the sticker so I could know where the front of the book was to show you, and I knew this one wasn't from the library. I really do deserve this punishment. Okay, bye. All right, I am halfway through Icebreaker, and obviously it's not good, but I'm not going to pretend like it's the worst thing I've ever read in my life. Reading this after reading Ice Planet Barbarians, it's a relief to have characters who are characters at all with any capacity for thought or feeling. I am not absolutely hating this. Though at halfway through, I already know that this book is way too fucking long and repetitive, and there are truly 10 million characters and all of them have 25 different nicknames. So good luck to you following this summary and keeping track of who is who, especially because I do need to say right off the bat that I'm probably going to pronounce the main character's name, Anastasia, a couple of different ways, and I'm not going to be able to stop myself from doing that. You're just going to have to put up with it. I'm sorry. Sometimes my brain and my mouth are not on the same wavelength. So this book begins not with the first chapter, but with a playlist. And it is exactly the playlist that you would expect it to be. I'm sorry to say, the first song is Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift. Do the Swifties even like that song? Out of 20 songs in here, I swear to God, 5 of them are Ariana Grande. Also, One Kiss by Dua Lipa featuring Calvin Harris. This book came out in 2022. I honestly think that listening to this playlist would be a worse experience than reading the actual book. I'm so sorry, don't come for me. So after this awesome playlist, we get chapter 1. Anastasia. Seeing her name at the top of the chapter made me think, thank God. Thank God it's alternating point of views again. What was I going to do without them? So this first perspective is Anastasia Allen, the star figure skater of the University of California, Maple Hills. Now, this book does not trust you to just be thrown into it, so it's like a lot of exposition in these first few chapters. Like, she calls her coach Coach Aubrey Brady, like her full name, as if she's ever going to do that again, as if we weren't going to be able to understand that this is her coach. She also says stuff like, I want to throw my ice skates at her head, as if we were going to think that they were roller skates, on a book with this cover. Though I know that there's some controversy about this cover. I know this cover is a little bit misleading, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. I'll look it up after I'm done with the book, but I don't really care. So we're in a scene where Anastasia is practicing with her skating partner because regionals is coming up. And of course, her partner is introduced with his full name. That is a really funny and to me juvenile quirk of this book, which is that every single person has a first and last name, and there are 2 million of them, and all of them have both names and are introduced with both names. I can't pinpoint why exactly that feels so young adult to me, but I think because it's paired with this corny and often overly simplistic writing style, having all these characters introduced by their first and last name feels like a poorly written 2000s, like, Disney Channel original movie almost. I feel like I'm watching High School fucking Musical. There's something very clunky about it. So both Anastasia and her partner Aaron are obsessive, disciplined tryhards, but she points that inward and he points it outwards at her. She says that she had gained 5 pounds freshman year and he told her that she was getting too heavy to pick up. And now she's like incredibly disordered with her eating, very, very regimented with it. She says now, 3 years later in junior year, she hasn't put on an ounce of weight. And that's like pretty fucking heavy for 3 pages into this book. And you do wonder how much this is going to develop in the rest of the story. And where I'm at halfway through, it hasn't really been depicted as the full-blown eating disorder that I think it is. It's kind of doing this balancing act where she has an eating disorder, but it doesn't really want to be anything other than like a kind of fluffy romance, so it doesn't really get into it. I do think that it's more showing us how abusive Aaron is as a skating partner and as a friend, and how unaware Anastasia is of his abuse and how willing she is to take the blame. So Aaron and Anastasia are skating partners, but they also live together, and she's very clear that they're not involved with each other. And for some reason, I kept annotating in this book in the beginning that I wish that he was like a really offensive, stereotypical gay best friend archetype. So take that as you will. I don't know why I felt so strongly about that. I no longer really think that, but damn, it was the only thing I could think for the first few chapters of this book. Why is he not gay? Why is he not gay in a really offensive way? I'm pissed off. Anastasia is sleeping with a different student athlete, Ryan Rothwell, the captain of the basketball team. So as her and Aaron are driving home from practice, he's asking her what she's getting up to that night. And she's like, oh, I'm getting it on with Ryan because all of the people in this book are are so incredibly involved in their friends' sex lives. It's absolutely beyond me. I've never read anything like this. I don't know if this is true to life, but this is not something I have ever experienced. Aaron isn't even really fazed by this. Instead, he's like, I don't even know how you're with that guy. He's twice your size. How does he not crush you? Which might sound kind of like a comment about Anastasia's weight, considering what I just said, but I'm pretty sure it isn't, because I am 200 pages into this book now, and I know that Anastasia being oh so tiny and small in the context of her sexual relationships will be brought up maybe once every 5 fucking pages. It's absolutely relentless, even worse than it was in Ice Planet Barbarians. Are there shitty hetero romance books out there with 2 average height people as the leads? Let me know. They get home and their roommate Lola is there, and Lola is complaining about Olivia Abbott, using her first name, of course, because this is her first introduction. She's saying, who apostrophe S dick did Olivia suck? Well, that's not right. That should be whose with a S-E at the end. Whose dick did Olivia suck to get the lead in the play once again? Because Lola is a theater major. Except with the way she's written, I really struggle to believe that Hannah Grace knows any kids who pursued theater beyond high school, because Lola would be so much more annoying than she is now, I'm sorry. Aaron's like, what are we talking about? And Lola says, we're talking about Olivia Abbott. And Aaron's like, oh, she's the hottest girl on campus, because he's not gay for some reason. And I don't know why, but this causes like a huge argument between them. And Anastasia just kind of like slowly backs out of the room. And then she comes out later and she's like, guys, is everyone friends again? It's one of many imagined conflicts in this story. What are they even fighting about? I have no idea. While Anastasia is off in her room, she's thinking about how she loves Aaron, but he is a really difficult and sometimes volatile person. And part of that is that he struggles to live with others after growing up as an only child, and how that clashes with Lola's attitude, being the youngest in a large family. This is another thing that feels very young adult about this book, with how heavy the focus is on whether or not people are only children. In the beginning here, with all these introductions, it's brought up like a lot. And it just makes the characters feel a lot younger than other books I've read with characters in their early 20s. This feels like at the most freshmen. And they're juniors and seniors. So when Anastasia comes out of her room to let her friends with benefits pal Ryan into the house, she grabs a handful of popcorn from Lola's bowl on the couch, and she thinks, I've got to remember to put this handful of popcorn into my food planner later. And you're like, oh, this is like a genuinely really serious eating disorder that she has. And then it's not. At this point, it's kind of just been a quirk that comes up every so often to show both how regimented and serious she is about figure skating and how controlling Aaron is. Not as like the very serious illness that it would obviously be, this all-encompassing issue that it would be if you were at the point of adding a handful of popcorn to a food tracker. Anyway, Ryan comes in, Anastasia's like, it's so weird how I get butterflies when I see him. Isn't it strange how comforting his smell is to me? And that's a romance trope that I fucking hate and continues happening in this book, where characters, like typically the women, are always like, oh my God, I can't be in love with this handsome, kind, thoughtful man because he's him and I'm me. Like, what are you fucking talking about? It's like the authors have a concept of that as a trope, but they don't have any understanding of it having like meaning or depth beyond just like, oh, I can't be in love with him. Like, I think that the characters need a reason to believe these things. It's so absurd to me. When Lola sees Ryan, she's like, hey buddy, let's strike a deal, because I'm gonna have to listen to you having sex with my roommate all night. Can I have the code to your room so that I don't have to fight for the shared bathroom at the party at your place tonight? And you hear that and you think, okay, it couldn't really be any more clear. It's actually bordering on being too clear and handholdy with how much information is in there that they probably wouldn't have shared between each other in a normal conversation. And yet, Anastasia goes, campus housing has electronically coded locks on bedroom doors for security. Ryan's room has a private bathroom, so Lo's request is a good idea since the bathroom line gets ridiculous the drunker people get. Oh my God. Oh my God. I don't think that she could have given us any more information than she did. Like, it's truly all laid out. She even says that drunk people have to go to the bathroom. She explains that part to us. Holy fucking shit. Holy shit. She thinks I'm 6 years old, which is crazy knowing what's to come in this book. The end of chapter 1, it's just straight to Ryan and Anastasia doing it, though it doesn't get into the explicit graphic detail that it will go into later on in the book because they are not the couple that this story is following. Then we're introduced to Nate, the other half of the couple that this story is following. He's captain of the school's hockey team, and he is a total womanizer. He's not surprised that he's waking up in bed with an unfamiliar random woman at his side, but then he looks at her, and he is surprised, because that's Kitty Vincent. This is like a huge thing for him. I truly thought that she was going to end up being more meaningful or like some sort of antagonist in his life. She's come up maybe one other time and truly just in passing, but he goes on and on about how she's the biggest bitch in the world, how she's part of a subspecies of women at the university with access to daddy's credit card. Subspecies? He keeps talking about how he'd never expect himself to be caught dead with Kitty Vincent, though he would have sex with literally any other thing that breathes. And this just makes him seem like a deeply unlikable character from his first introduction. And I kind of thought that he was going to have this journey, that this was deliberate. He was going to become a more likable man. He was going to settle down with Anastasia. That's not really how it goes. He's a very different character than he is in these first few pages of his introduction, and there's no arc that gets him there. He's really troubled. He's really troubled by having sex with Kitty Vincent, who is the biggest bitch in the world, though it never shows us that. So it just seems like he's a fucking asshole. It is true. Like, the times she's brought up in passing, it's like, oh my god, Kitty Vincent, that bitch. It makes everybody seem like absolutely horrible people if you're not going to show us how she's a bitch. Anyway, he's really troubled by this, and he thinks, I remember telling Robbie, my best friend, that this year was going to be different when we were driving home back to school from Colorado to California. Oh my god, could you give me any more exposition? Looking back, I honestly forgot how awkward these first few chapters were, where all it wants to do is deliver information to you as plainly and clearly as possible. It treats you like you're so dumb. No wonder parents were buying this book for their 11-year-olds. Okay, so now we get introduced to Nate's roommates and fellow hockey players. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this in a way that doesn't make me sound like I'm coming from a place of bigotry, because I'm coming from the opposite place. But there is this very forced diversity with Nate's roommates, and it feels so obvious when it's like, well, Robbie is in a wheelchair, and we just treat him like he's a normal person. And JJ is pansexual, and all of us and his family, we go to the LA Pride Parade with our pansexual ally flag pins. What is that? What is that? What is that? I'm sorry, what the fuck is a pansexual ally flag pin? That is not a thing. Absolutely, people go to pride parades to support their loved ones. I don't think they do it like that, though. Am I insane? I don't think they do it like that. I'm less bothered with JJ's sexuality being this thing that truly has only come up the one time right here in the beginning, because, like, whatever, he's a side character. Maybe it isn't that important to his life. Probably it is if he's taken the whole gang to the Pride Parade, but maybe it isn't. Robbie being a wheelchair user gets to me a little bit more, though. I think that him becoming disabled after an accident in high school, which was literally like 5 years before the events of this story, would be meaningful in his life. I think his lived experience would be meaningfully impacted by that. And I don't know if acting like he's just a guy who happens to be in a wheelchair and only ever bringing up his disability to talk about the initiating incident and be all like, ooh, scary about it, which I find to be a very able-bodied way of talking about disability anyway. I don't think that's really doing anything for anyone. A few chapters from this in the book, Lola and Robbie get together, and neither of them have any thoughts or feelings about it. Not even about, like, I don't know, the accessibility of Lola's apartment. Is it even disabled representation if you can just peel off the wheelchair sticker that's been placed over your character and it's just an average dude underneath and nothing has changed at all? Maybe just a few lines need to be taken out of the story and that's it? It also does feel like this book is patting itself on the back for treating minority characters like they're normal. But that means that this book's concept of normal is just right there at the forefront in a really uncomfortable way that it doesn't feel like it has even recognized. In practice, it means writing a pansexual man like he's straight and everyone around him treating him like he's straight. It means writing a disabled man like he's able-bodied with everyone around him treating him like he's able-bodied. I honestly don't think that's representation that anyone is interested in. It's self-conscious at best and kind of ignorant at worst. Anyway, their other roommate is Henry. He's a sophomore living with the seniors for some reason that I can't remember and I don't care to, and he's heavily implied to be autistic, but in a way where everybody babies him, and honestly, it gets really fucking old really fucking fast, and I know people are going to come for me for that. Reading this book, I know that Henry is absolutely a fan favorite here, but I think I'm tired. After so many long-winded introductions that make us feel like these characters have just been plopped into this world just in time for the book to start, the hockey coach calls an emergency meeting. and it's all verbal abuse and whatever. Sport, you know how sports are. He tells them that somebody broke the generator and the cooling system of one of the school's 2 ice rinks, and he knows that it was them because they would do that. For some reason, they would sabotage their own ice rink, and now they have to share a rink with the figure skaters. Why anyone would think that the hockey players would fuck up their own rink, I don't know, but Nate does notice that one of the younger players, Russ, looks white as a ghost. Then we go back to Anastasia, who is freaking out because the planner that she uses to obsessively plan every minute of every day, something that is only kind of true later in the book, it has been thrown into chaos because there's an emergency meeting called with all of the student athletes, and she's in line to get into the arena, which I don't know. I feel like if there's enough people for there to be a line to get into the arena, which she acts like it takes fucking hours, then I doubt there's a time slot that they could have found where all of the student athletes would be available for an emergency meeting. Whatever. Ryan meets her in line and he asks her about the motivational quote that she posted on Instagram that morning, which was something like, just enjoy where you are in life. And I love this. I think this is genuinely an awesome and absolutely insufferable quality for a main character. I love this character choice. She posts motivational quotes on Instagram. Like, she has all the wisdom in the universe at 21 years old and is not an extremely uptight, rigid person. Honest to God, that is incredible. I wish it came up more. It really rarely ever does. So the sports director goes on this long rant, and then at the end, he asks all of the ice athletes to stay, and he tells them that they're going to need to share a rink for the time being. And Anastasia has an absolute fucking conniption. Regionals are just a couple of weeks away. What is she going to do? How's she going to practice if she has to share the rink? She's trying not to absolutely freak out when she looks over and she sees this guy, this hunk of a man, talking to the hockey coach, but he's giving her a sympathetic look. And when she's done talking to her coach, he comes over and he says, I'm so sorry about this. I'm going to try to make it as smooth as possible. And also, you should come to our party tonight. Anastasia's like, didn't you hear? Party time is over. Because, of course, she has to play hard to get. And then Aaron shows up and he lays a protective arm over her shoulders, but then also snaps at her. And then that's the end of Anastasia and Nate's first ever conversation. Then we go back to Nate's point of view. Nate, who's thinking about the brown-haired figure skater as if anybody fucking describes anybody like that, and how mad she was, and how he hopes that she comes to his party that night. He thinks she's a funny little thing, sassing me, and that just gives me shivers. Get away from her. That is so weird and infantilizing. I hate it. At the party, Nate takes Russ up into a room, and he asks him what the hell's going on, and Russ admits that he was hooking up with this girl. He didn't know that she had a boyfriend. The boyfriend found out, and the boyfriend trashed the rink. And Nate thinks, Russ has a hard home life. I've got to protect him so he doesn't lose his scholarship. Okay? Then they go back down to the party. At the party, Nate is trying to convince this girl, Summer, that he's been pining after for the past 4 years to have sex with him. And everybody's like, haha, that's so Nate. He's only interested in her because she's the only girl on campus who doesn't want him. Weird. He then runs into Anastasia, who's shown up here with Lola, and he talks about how from his height advantage, he can see that she has nothing in her cup and is pretending to drink. Whatever that means. Something about the disordered eating and also something about, did you know he's taller than her? We'll come back to this many times. She's like really sassy and cold, and she blows him off by saying that she's going to go get in line for the bathroom. But he's like, let me take you to my private bathroom. And she says, ugh, okay, fine. And then for some reason, they hold hands. Like they link their fingers together to walk upstairs to the bathroom. When they walk up the stairs, he thinks to himself, uh-oh, I made a mistake letting her go in front because now her ass is in my face and now I've got a fucking hard on. Ugh. This is the 45th second that you have spent in her presence. Keep it in your fucking pants. He's talking about how her leather pants look freaking painted on and how her corset shows her indescribable body. Come on, guy. What the hell? He waits for her on his bed while she goes to the bathroom, which is kind of weird as fuck. And then she's like, ugh, I'm pissed that you're still here. I was going to snoop around in your room. And he's like, be my guest. And then he sits on the desk so that they're at eye level. I don't know how much more I can take of this book screaming at me that she's a tiny little thing and he's much bigger than her. I get it. Anastasia is being all mean and sarcastic with her walls up, but he's like, it's like being verbally abused by Tinkerbell, which is obviously just yet again emphasizing that she's small and he's big, but it pissed me the fuck off because as if it's not a well-documented fact that Tinkerbell has the capacity to be a stone-cold bitch sometimes. Yes, you associate her with being pretty and small, but she contains fucking multitudes, okay? Anastasia is acting like this because it's kind of her personality, but also she's upset with the rink situation. And he says, I promise it wasn't us. We didn't do this. And this makes her eyes soften. And so you know it's going to be the first thing that causes major issues between them. But first, there's a smaller issue. They head downstairs, this time with Nate in front so that he's not looking at her ass. And then he says, oh no, her boyfriend is here. And I like this. I like this little play. I like that it's making you think that it's going to be Ryan and then it ends up being Aaron. I think this especially works because Aaron is a lot scarier than Ryan. I think this is kind of a killer moment and I will give it to you, Hannah Grace. Aaron is like, what were you doing upstairs with him? Just being like so demanding and controlling and overbearing and literally for what? What does it matter to him? It's crazy. He drives me fucking nuts. I genuinely love his character. I think it's really, really, really well done. He's like, I thought that you were collecting team captains like Pokemon. And this, for whatever reason, almost makes her cry. This is so deeply upsetting to Anastasia. And it's like, who is this woman? Is she a hard ass or not? If this was more with like a withering insult, or if he had any basis for what he was saying, maybe I could get behind this character of Aaron being the only person who can really break her down. But I don't know if this scene is getting us there. Anyway, Aaron has somehow found out what happened to the rink and he is here to stir shit up. He turns Anastasia on Nate like that because Nate lied to her. Nate promised that it wasn't his team who did it, and it sort of kind of was. And this is unreasonable because I'm not totally sure. Because a pinky promise means something more to people in a romance book than it does to actual real life people, I think is truly the answer. Nate is distressed at losing all of the good grace that he had gained, and Anastasia thinks, well, I have my goals too. My time on the ice is just as valuable as his. But like, whoever implied that it wasn't? What does this mean? This turns into an absolutely hallucinated fight where they're just saying things that have no relation to anything the other person has said. They're just getting each other upset as if the other one means something more than the maybe 5 minutes that they've spent together. Truly, you read this fight and you're like, what is happening? Why are emotions so high when it comes to like the trust between these two strangers? When she goes to leave, she runs into Ryan, who's kind of snuggling up with Olivia Abbott, and she honestly doesn't have any feelings about this. Her and Ryan are explicitly not dating. She is not interested in commitment, and she thinks that he's a great guy and she wants the best for him. But to have her be walking away from a conversation where she cared so much about a stranger to then run into Ryan, who she admits gives her butterflies, and not care about this is a little bit weird. I don't really understand what's going on in her head or where her priorities are at. Instead, she's thinking, oh, Olivia is beautiful and she seems so nice. I can't wait to see where this goes. And that's where the scene ends. That's where the line break happens. It's just such an abrupt tone shift from the screaming that she was just doing 2 paragraphs ago. So she goes to work at the rink in town the next day, which she started at because her textbooks were getting too expensive. And I have to ask, if she is not apparently possibly Olympic bound and the best figure skater at this school, would she not have a sports scholarship? Is this me misunderstanding American post-secondary, or is this Hannah Grace, the British author, misunderstanding American post-secondary? Ryan comes to her work and he brings her lunch and she won't eat it, and they do this little back and forth, and part of me thinks it is meant to be like funny and quirky, like, women always starving themselves, haha. But I am holding back because this eating disorder thing has time to develop. Poorly, if it does so in the last 200 pages and doesn't really do anything for the first, but it could. They're having a conversation about what happened the night before. Ryan's trying to defend Nate. Anastasia's like, he acted like I was being dramatic. How are we supposed to be equals if he won't even try to see my point of view? And it's like, what are you talking about? Who even is this man? Equals? Where did that come from? It feels like there's this knowledge of topics that people might get into fights about, and then they're just thrown in with no understanding of those topics needing like a basis. Like, what do you mean? How are we going to be equals? What does that mean in terms of like your life? Anastasia's basically like, you know what? No, I'm going to hold this grudge against every hockey player ever for the rest of time, which she's definitely being a little bit sarcastic about. And then we go back to Nate's perspective. Nate starts with being like, these last 3 weeks have sucked, which is something that this book does almost constantly, where it starts a chapter by telling you exactly how much time has passed since the last chapter. I don't know. It's as if the book thinks that we can't understand the passage of time without it being so explicit like this. I swear to God, I could have figured it out. I promise you, I could have figured out that it's been a couple of weeks since the last time we saw Nate. You didn't need to tell me, but it just does it every single time. It's more chapters starting with that than not. It tries to set up stakes for him here in this chapter where it talks about how the Vancouver Vipers want him for their team after he graduates this year. So he needs to be on his best behavior. But this very, very rarely comes up, which I'm honestly kind of thankful for. I think Anastasia's half-baked Olympic dreams are more than enough pressure for this very non-tense book, and with anything else, it would just feel muddled. So Nate is trying to plan Robbie's 21st birthday surprise party that Robbie requested Nate plan, and he knows that Robbie wants Anastasia's roommate Lola there because they were getting down and dirty at that last party. So even though Anastasia has been ignoring him, he manages to corner her and get her to agree to invite Lola to the party, and he's like, you could come too if you wanted. Aaron has seen the two of them talking, and this is bad news. Later, he tells Nate, she's not gonna fuck you. She's not playing hard to get. The iciest part about her is her heart, which is awesome. That is so good. That is the corniest line I've ever read in my life. That is absolutely incredible. The iciest thing about her is her heart. Please. Okay, so having established Aaron as the antagonist in everyone's life, we go back to Anastasia. The hockey team and the figure skaters are doing a team building exercise for some fucking reason. The sports director wanted this. I cannot imagine that he actually cares about the students this much. And there isn't a world in which he's gonna make them do team building exercises, except one where it exists to move the plot forward. And it doesn't even really do that all that well. The team building exercise they're doing, what's the team? They're sharing a rink. That doesn't mean they're on the ice at the same time. They're just both using the rink. They just need to split their time at the rink. The team building exercise is a speed dating thing, which is just patently insane. But Anastasia finds herself kind of liking some of these hockey boys. Up till now, she had only liked Henry because he's sweet and he's thoughtful and he says everything he thinks with no filter, which is charming at first, but like I said, it gets really tiring alongside everyone else treating him like he's a useless baby. He had come up to her in the library and explained what happened with Russ and why Nate felt like he needed to protect Russ, which thawed her a little bit, just to him. Henry's been the only hockey player that she'll even look at, but she's always giving him these sweet little smiles and like patting him on the arm like he's a little baby. Also, for some reason, Robbie is part of the speed dating thing, even though he's the assistant coach, but like what fucking ever. There are enough issues with this. I don't need to harp on about that. Of course, the last person that she sees is Nate, and the two of them agree to start again, and she tells him that he's on probation so that they can continue their dynamic where she's like a little bit icy and cold and he's pining after her like a lost puppy, okay? Then in Nate's chapter, he's talking about setting up the surprise party for Robbie and how Robbie was being a prick by not leaving the house knowing that they were waiting for him to go so that they could set up. They call each other pricks a lot, which is not unheard of on this side of the Atlantic, but it comes up often enough in here that it just feels like a little bit wrong. Everything with this setting is like close to being right, but isn't quite there. And then you flip to the back and you read the author bio and it says that she's British and she lives in England. And you're like, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. Of course she is. So Nate has the bartender that he hired with his dad's money all set up. And he thinks to himself, making this party invite only was one of my smarter ideas. To start with, you would never mutter the words free bar on this campus unless you wanted to be bankrupted. Second, it meant I could stick Tim, one of the rookies, on the door with a guest list. What does that mean? What is this list? What is the topic of this list? What do you mean second? That has no relation to the thing that you said before. Or the topic that you said the list was, which is like, this is the reasons why this was such a good idea. The reason is so I can put Tim on the door. It doesn't say Tim's a bad guy, we don't want him at the party. I don't get it. Anyway, the party happens. Anastasia, of course, shows up with Lola. She looks hot and sexy, but also grumpy to be there. And Nate looks at her and he's like, I recognize that look. She wants to argue with me. They have had 3 conversations. But she doesn't fight with him. Instead, she's like, I need to use the bathroom. And then they go upstairs, once again with her ass in his face. And she comes out of the bathroom and he's once again waiting on the bed. And then he thinks, maybe this attraction isn't as one-sided as I thought it was, which is just like something that he has never once expressed before. He says to her, do I need to get on my knees and beg for your forgiveness about the Russ thing? And she's like, the only time I want a man on his knees is if he's eating me out. So he starts eating her out. There's meant to be this mic drop moment at the end of the chapter before he starts doing it, where he says, let's test that theory, shall we? Referring to something about him not needing a map to find her G-spot, whatever. That's what they're talking about. Except there is so much narration between the last sentence spoken in their conversation and the end of the chapter where he says, let's test that theory, that it's not a mic drop. You get to it and you're like, wait, what is he referring to? I forgot. It's so very clunky. We flip back to her and she talks about how she shouldn't be enjoying how he's hooked her leg over his shoulder and how he's licking the inside of her thigh. And it's like, but why not? You have just imagined this like incompatibility? Is that what it is? Is that even what it's trying to say? He makes her come and she screams at the top of her lungs in this house full of people, which like, girl, have some fucking decorum. And then she leaves his room and she thinks, I'd make a bad criminal. I'd end up getting caught. Like, that's not the most redundant fucking thing ever. A couple of days later, because there was, of course, a full stop in this chapter, and of course, it had to start the next section by saying it's a couple days later, because it always fucking does that. Lola comes into the room where Ryan and Anastasia are sleeping. They didn't have sex the night before, they just watched a movie and then fell asleep. And she's like, I brought you a gift, and it's from Nate. He also got me a gift too. Let's open the gifts, okay? Then Anastasia says, what feels like hours after she first came into the room, we finally opened the boxes. But it's truly been like 2 sentences, and she has not expressed any excitement or curiosity. I feel like it's not that hard to communicate something feeling like it's taking a longer time than it is without just explicitly saying it, but this book really struggles to trust that you're picking up what it's putting down. Anyway, they open the gifts on FaceTime with the hockey boys, and it's a jersey for each of them. Sure. Henry is on the FaceTime because they all live together, and he sees Anastasia, and he says to Nate, but I thought she was avoiding you ever since you ate her out. And then Robbie quickly goes, Lola, we gotta go to practice. He says, I'll speak to you later, yeah? Which is like the most fucking British phrasing I've ever heard. Once they hang up, Ryan and Lola are all over her like, oh my God, tell me everything. What happened with you and Nate? And then the two of them agree that she needs to have sex with Nate for science. Back with Nate's point of view, he's thinking about how after he got her off, Anastasia sprinted away from him and out of his house, and how she's been avoiding him ever since. And he's like, maybe it's because she actually is seeing Ryan? They were just in bed together on that FaceTime. But then he's like, no, I saw Ryan cuddling up with Olivia Abbott. And I just have to ask, what size is this fucking school? They have 2 ice rinks, hundreds of student athletes, and yet somehow everyone knows everyone and they're all up in each other's business. Okay, then for some reason in this chapter, it starts dropping like Nate demographic information on us. He's talking about how his dad is calling him over and over again, and how for a normal dad, that would be because it's their first game of the season coming up. But unfortunately, my dad isn't normal, which rules. That's awesome. Then really quickly, he's talking about how nice it is that Robbie's parents have come to California to visit Robbie for his birthday. And he drops that it feels just like back when his mom was alive. Okay. And then truly like heartbreak. That was it. There was nothing more to that scene. Now we go to him saying that he always knows shit is going down when his phone is incessantly buzzing, which like, yeah, dude. Yeah, that would mean that. And then actually it turns out literally nothing is going down. It's just the hockey group chat, which is called Puck Bunnies. Devastating. And they're like talking about how Kitty and Summer and Anastasia all live in the same building. It's nothing. It means nothing. Nothing is happening. They're kind of just picking at him. There is this part here that I like where he gets a little bit annoyed with his group chat because they are picking at him. And then it says, Nate Hawkins has left Puck Bunnies. Joe Carter has added Nate Hawkins to Puck Bunnies. Nate Hawkins has left Puck Bunnies. Maddie Lou has added Nate Hawkins to Puck Bunnies. That's realistic. I like that. I thought that was funny. That got a chuckle out of me. I'll give it up. Nate then goes to the rink early to watch Anastasia skate because he wants to talk to her about why she's avoiding him. And he's like, oh my God, wow, she's really good. This is so majestic. They complete a lift and Nate goes, I let go of the breath that I wasn't even holding, which is awesome. That's so cliche that it's almost a cliche to call it cliche. But then their skating practice goes wrong because Anastasia once again fails to complete the move that she hasn't been able to nail, and she slams hard into the boards and her head starts bleeding. And for some reason, even though she is standing and has skated over to where Nate and the coach are before her head starts bleeding, when it starts, Nate goes, I'm going to pick you up and carry you to the first aid room. I hate this shit so much. Nothing irks me more than grown men just picking grown women up in romance books. What is that? He takes her to the first aid room and he nurses her back to health. I don't know. He has first aid training or something. He's doing like a sports medicine degree because of course he is. And he has a moment to be like, why have you been avoiding me? But she's like, dude, I have a competition tomorrow. I have a head injury. I cannot be dealing with this. Then Aaron, who Nate has come to despise, comes to the door of the room, and Aaron is, of course, being a dick. And Nate is trying to push past it, and he just says, can you ask Lola to check on Anastasia while she's sleeping? She might be concussed. And he's like, well, I can just do it. My room is as close to her room as Lola's is. And Nate realizes by saying, what the fucking fuck, that Lola, Anastasia, and Aaron all live together. Aaron is in that house and he hates this dude for good reason. I do feel like that would have come up considering that Robbie and Lola have been dating at this point for like a few weeks. whatever. Then it's Anastasia and Aaron at their competition. Honestly, who cares? It goes fine. There's no like tension, urgency, or pressure about this until the very last moment where she's about to compete with him. And even then, it's like maybe a paragraph, and a redundant one at that, because of course it is. The romance takes an absolute forefront in this book over everything else, and then randomly the other things that are going on in their lives pop up, because it does love to throw you all over the place, and you're like, damn, I had no idea that this was happening. I had no idea that the competition was this close, but it is like objectively a pretty important thing for this character. It's crazy. Something that I do like and that I will continue to commend is the depiction of the abusive friendship with Aaron. I really like how much Anastasia defends him. How when he's not being literally the worst guy who's ever existed, she's like, he's so nice. He bought me dinner after verbally abusing me for the past 3 weeks. I like how it shows her needing to walk on eggshells so that he doesn't punish her for tiny, inconsequential missteps. I like how she's acutely aware of all of the absolutely unreasonable things that would set him off, and how she takes responsibility for his outbursts and emotions. I think it's done truly surprisingly well, and it makes Aaron and her relationship to him absolutely fascinating, and it feels pretty realistic. He is a great antagonist in this story. Of course, it sometimes goes over the top with his behaviors, but the strongest thing in this book is how Anastasia deals with him and justifies him internally. It is honestly great. I wish the whole thing was about the two of them. So Anastasia goes home after the competition, and she starts getting ready to go to a party with Lola to celebrate the hockey team winning their game that was at the same time as the competition. They get to the club. Anastasia says, I'm most excited to see Henry. At this point, I don't even think that statement requires explanation. So like, cut that entire thing then. Why do you have to say the back half of that sentence? You can just say, I'm most excited to see Henry if it doesn't need explanation. Oh my God. That's why this book is so long, because there are way too many words. Sentiments are expressed that don't need to be. And then lots of things are said more than once. It's so fucking repetitive. It's so redundant. And it's 430 pages. Maybe if this was 200 pages, I'd honestly give it 3 stars, but how it is, it's tiring me out. She sees Nate at the club, of course, and they have this very quick, flirty conversation before he leaves her standing there, and she's like shocked that she doesn't have him at her fingertips anymore. Then we go to Nate's perspective, and he's thinking, from now on, Anastasia is gonna come to me. Who the fuck knows where this change of heart is coming from? Whatever. It does work. The night at the club ends with everyone in an Uber, and Anastasia and Nate are sitting in the back seat, and he fucking fingers her back there. And she screams when she comes. You guys, have some fucking tact. What the hell? Ew. Also, during this, he calls her nipples stiff peaks. Like, that's awesome. Like, they're meringue. Stiff peak, my stiff peaks, my... They get back to the house, and somehow only Lola noticed that they were like fucking each other in the back seat, and she does not care. Something so fucking strange about this book that I know I said before is just how comfortable everyone is to be involved in their friends' sex lives. It permeates through the whole damn thing. It's fucking crazy. Literally, every friend is very comfortable with like seeing their friends' hookups naked, and then the hookups are also chill with it. I don't know. I don't think this is true to life. They get back to the boys' house, and Lola's trying to grill Anastasia about what happened in the Uber, but then Nate comes by and he tells Lola that Robbie said to go get her chicken nuggets. And it says her eyes widen, and she probably forgot all about them, knowing Lola, which is a really good example of the way this book uses "and" in the wrong spot in a sentence. Her eyes widen, and she probably forgot all about them. That's not right. That's not correct. That's just grammatically wrong. And it makes it feel so clunky. Also, this is an issue because that's not something that we've been shown about Lola at all, and it's not something that we will be shown about Lola. It's not a part of her character that ever comes up again at least halfway through the book. It's just saying things. Okay, so Anastasia and Nate go up to his room so that they can take this all the way, and she tries putting in the code for his door, but it's wrong, and she realizes it's because she's putting in Ryan's code, and she decides to say that out loud. And then this is the trigger for misunderstanding, miscommunication, back and forth, number 20 fucking 5, okay? Nate gets jealous, and he stops them having sex by saying, I want to do this with you when we're sober so that you can't run away from me like you did last time. And Anastasia feels rejected, and she leaves feeling rejected. She gets mad, she waits for him to fall asleep, and then she goes. She calls an Uber. Nate wakes up the next morning, and she's not there. He's calling her over and over again. She's not picking up. He's thinking about how last night, after he made her orgasm in the Uber, how she was cute and sleepy and docile, curled up on my lap, babbling nonsense. Why is it characterizing her like she is a child in this moment? I am frightened. I fucking hate that. I think that's absolutely horrifying, babbling nonsense after I fingered her in the back of a fucking Uber. Why is the Uber driver gotta be involved in this, by the way? Finally, Nate goes downstairs and he finds his friends all sitting hungover around the breakfast table, and they say, dude, Anastasia's still here. We weren't gonna let her leave alone and drunk in an Uber. We set her up in Henry's room and they haven't come downstairs yet. Of course, Nate is very jealous and he runs upstairs. He barges into Henry's room and he's so relieved to see Anastasia sitting on Henry's bed with a mug of coffee in her hand while Henry is beside her on an air mattress on the floor. Except, how did she get the coffee if they haven't been downstairs yet? Is this trying to say that the boys were lying and they had been downstairs? Is that it? In any other book, I would give it the benefit of the doubt. I would think that this is trying to subtly tell me something. But here, I just can't really see it. Nothing in the book so far has felt anywhere close to that deliberate. Henry quickly leaves the two of them to have a chat, which they do. Nate admits to jealousy being his motivation in stopping them from having sex, and Anastasia says that she really struggles with feeling rejected. And then she tells him that it feels like he wants more out of this than she's willing to give, that he wants a relationship and she is not interested in commitment. The conversation ends with her being like, I really just wanted to mess around. And he's like, I got it. We're on the same page now. We can just mess around. And then I'm pretty sure sarcastically, she says, no, Nate, now you're number one on my shit list. And this starts more of the playing out of this very tired back and forth, but this time in a more direct sexual tension kind of way. But it's the same dynamic, and I think it always will be. Okay, boom, new scene. Nate's team is on the ice practicing. They're 15 minutes over their time, but Anastasia's coach is 15 minutes late, so they just keep going. And then Anastasia skates onto the ice, and of course, everyone's like, she's gonna get hurt. We got to get her off the ice, and it's like supposed to be this cinematic scene of all the hockey players playing hockey and this beautiful figure skater being so stubborn on the ice. And what do you think happens? But Nate fucking picks her up and carries her off the ice because of course he does. Did you forget that she was small? We can't let you forget that she's small. She gets all pissed, but like kind of sarcastically. And then she says, I need to start my practice. I can't go late. I'm going somewhere tonight. Nate gets a little bit jealous about this. He's a little possessive. He texts her once practice is over, asking her where she's going. And she says, if you can find me by midnight, we can have sex. And then she gets all of his friends in on it, because they're all really involved in their friend's sex life, and they plan a party at his place that he's not going to find out about until midnight. And so then he goes all around campus to all the parties looking for her while she's in his bedroom the whole time. So she only reveals where she is when there's 9 minutes to midnight and he's 10 minutes away. And everyone's sitting in the kitchen waiting for him to walk through the door with his tail between his legs. And Anastasia thinks, it's just like New Year's, even though it's October. And then she says, it's because it's exciting and we're all watching the clock, as if I couldn't have identified the parallels myself. Come on. When he comes in the door, everybody starts making fun of him. They're all like, haha, what an idiot. But before he can get all the way to the kitchen, he's stopped by Summer, that girl that he's been pining after that has shown no interest in him and continuously rejects him. And she stops him, whispers something to him, and then they walk upstairs together hand in hand. And this absolutely succeeds at making Anastasia jealous. And she bursts into the room and he's there alone. Summer just wanted to use the bathroom. And now the two of them are alone in Nate's bedroom. He's like, I knew I could make you jealous. And of course, they start having sex. This begins 10 million relentless pages of their first intercourse scene. It truly feels like every time that you think it's done, it goes on for 3 more orgasms. Before they start, he stands up and it has to tell you that he towers over her in case you forgot that she's small. And then, of course, he lives up to his constant descriptions. He's got a big schlong. She says, I don't even think that would fit in my mouth. Nate's thinking like, damn, is this really what's going to happen every time I get her alone in my room? And then he says, I mean, I'm good with that, but it feels too good to be true. And I think that's a great example of the very repetitive word choice used in this book. It feels like there isn't an editor who's read this and wanted to make it less clunky. Because why would this not say, I'm fine with that, or I'm happy with that? Why say good twice when it so clearly didn't need to be that word? Anyway, they do it forever. There's a million orgasms. There's also a part where it's portrayed as though Anastasia is like using his freakishly large genitals to pole dance on, essentially. Like, that's a pole and she's pole dancing on it. I don't know. I read that part like 3 or 4 times, not for the joy of it, but because I could not figure out what it was trying to convey. She's doing the splits on it? What does that mean? So it goes on forever, and then it finally ends, and Nate's like, I'll be right back. And he goes into Henry's room because Henry has a box of girl stuff, including things like conditioner, which Nate takes, and he's like, I don't even know what this is. I've never seen this before. So fucking annoying. What an annoying characterization of a man. He goes into Henry's room to get this box of girl stuff. Henry is half naked in bed with a woman. And Nate's like, sorry, I'll just be a minute, and goes in anyway. Sure, whatever. They're all very comfortable with each other. We go back to Anastasia, and she's crushing hard, and she's talking about how, is this what it feels like to be dignitized? And he's texting her being like, let's hang out. And she's like, no, I'm busy. I'm busy today. And he's like, how about tomorrow? She's like, I'm busy tomorrow. He's like, how about the next day? She's like, I'm busy literally every day. But he manages to convince her to let him pick her up from work at the skating rink. And then they make out for 20 minutes, and she gets back to her apartment, and Aaron sees a hickey on her neck. And it is kind of enough to make your stomach drop. And for good reason, because Aaron does react how you'd expect him to. He like turns and burrows into himself. He's moping around. He's punishing Anastasia for this for weeks, making their living situation so uncomfortable for everyone. Everyone's always saying that he's acting like this because he must be in love with her. And I really hope that that doesn't end up being the case, though I think it might be pointing that way. I think it would kind of damper how much I like his characterization for that to complicate things. Or honestly, to simplify things, I think is what it would do. Nate and Anastasia then do what he calls playing house, where they stay in for a night, and he washes her hair, and they get takeout, and she won't decide what to get because everything's way too many calories. But then when he orders her a big bucket of chicken wings and a bunch of cheese fries, she eats them gleefully, so gleefully that she is groaning and moaning while she takes bites at the kitchen table surrounded by his friends, which is huge pet peeve of mine. Keep it in your fucking pants when you're eating dinner in the kitchen. You know what? That's too much. Henry says to her, I'm going to have to be hearing you making those noises all night. Can you at least not do it at the dinner table? Because he says everything that comes into his mind. And Nate kind of like whisks her away back to his room. And Anastasia's like, Henry complained about hearing me moan, so let's make sure that I orgasm before he goes to bed. These people are on another level. What? The few times I've read a romance novel, I've usually had something to say about how sexually repressed it feels. This book is making me feel like the sexually repressed one. The next morning, Anastasia goes home to get ready with Lola for the Halloween party at the local club. She has planned some sort of costume involving something that JJ has to drop off. The boys also have a costume, and they want this costume to be a surprise because it's a big deal. And then Anastasia and Lola show up to the club, and they see a sea of yellow bodies, and I think to myself, it better not be fucking minions. And then it's minions. Their costume is their clever costume is that they're minions, and Nate's group. Then Anastasia reveals her costume, which is that she's wearing JJ's jersey, but as like a mini dress, and Nate instantly gets insanely jealous and possessive and overprotective, and as you might guess, he reacts to this by picking her up and throwing her over his shoulder and then taking her to the club bathroom where they have hate sex. He is like seething about this, but it's in what is meant to be an overprotective, like sexy, jealous because he likes me so much kind of way. And he literally says like, take off JJ's jersey or I'm gonna rip it from your body. She's not uncomfortable. She's like playing into it and teasing him and trying to rile him up. And he says, you think you can get under my skin? Ooh, sorry, that was tricky. Do you think I don't see the little game you're playing? It's my cock you come all over. Even when you want to put another guy's name on your back. It's my name you fucking scream. Which is out of character and also the cornball cringiest line in this book. That's worse than the iciest thing about her is her heart. They return to the party, as Anastasia says, smelling and looking like they just had sex in the club bathroom. And then Aaron shows up and he's clutching his arm, and she realizes that he's not wearing a costume. Yes, bitch. It is a Tonya Harding moment, kind of. Not really. Aaron is here to accuse Nate of sabotaging him by putting a slick of oil in front of his locker like it's fucking Looney Tunes. Obviously, Nate didn't do this. Why would Nate do this? And he swears that he didn't do it. But Anastasia doesn't know what to think. Nate, for some reason, then interrogates each and every member of his hockey team on whether or not they did this, but truly, I don't understand. Why would they? Aaron is not their competition. I bet that almost none of the players even know who he is. And of course, they all deny it. And Nate's like, call me crazy, but I believe them. That's the most sane thing in the world. Literally, of course you do. You should. Why would they do anything to Aaron? The coach calls a meeting because Aaron's parents have complained to the school, and he says, you're all benched until somebody fesses up. Because for whatever fucking reason, it has to be the fault of the hockey team. That some guy slipped. Some truly basically unrelated guy slipped. Nate wants to protect his team. So, of course, he stands up and he says, it was me, coach. And he admits to doing it. And then the punishment for this, the dean of the school comes up with, just like unilaterally over the phone, is that Nate can't play hockey until Aaron can skate again. What the fuck? Whatever that fucking means, this is pissing me off. As if that would be the punishment for admitting to a sabotage that caused bodily harm to another student. Like, I just cannot suspend my disbelief this much. What are you talking about? The coach tells him that Aaron's seeing a specialist who will tell them how long it'll be until he can get back on the ice, but that Aaron obviously needs to lift his girlfriend during their routine, which I have to believe that the hockey coach would know what pair skating is and that they're not necessarily boyfriend and girlfriend. This really is just here so that Nate can defensively go, she's not his girlfriend. And then the coach can go, this shit better not be over a girl. That's it. But it makes no sense. Logically inconsistent. Okay, then Nate goes over to Anastasia's house, even though he has a migraine from everything that's happening, and Aaron gleefully lets him in, and he points out Anastasia's room, where Nate opens the door to find her sobbing in Ryan's arms. He has come here to try to apologize, but his migraine is quickly making him lose consciousness, and Anastasia is also screaming at him that he keeps promising things to her, and then they end up not being true. And then as Nate starts passing out, Ryan lifts Anastasia and places her beside him on the bed, which is like, honestly, how much do we have to have her body described as if she is a toddler? Is this necessary? I'm so uncomfortable reading it. Anyway, Nate ends up projectile vomiting and then passing out. Then we get a chapter of Anastasia doing therapy, and sure, I could spend 15 minutes picking it apart, but I am losing steam. Who cares? The therapist both has been her therapist for the past 10 years and also knows nothing about her. Basically, she's like having a bad time and she's talking to him about it because she doesn't want to call Nate because he's probably going to be mad that she didn't believe him in the first place when he said he didn't hurt Aaron. I still don't know why there have been no established motivations for anyone at all to have hurt Aaron. Why that wasn't part of her believing or not believing Nate is beyond me. Okay, then Nate's perspective starts, and obviously the first sentence of it is telling us how much time has passed, because it does that every single time, even though it's almost always meaningless, and when it's not, it could have just showed us how much time had passed. He's like, I don't want to call Anastasia, because I'll just make everything worse. So they're in a hell of their own creation, which I guess is kind of accurate to how immature people in fresh relationships act. So Nate is at an away game and he's been allowed to play because Nate was cleared by his doctor to compete in sectionals today. I can't get over that Nate's punishment was just you're off the ice for the same time as him. I think that's so fucking insane. As if he would not be expelled. As if he would not be at least put on some sort of probation. It's so stupid. So they've won their hockey game. Nate goes into the hotel room. He's bought alcohol for everybody and all of the hockey boys are in there and they are all looking like truly someone has fucking died. And they tell him he dropped her while they were doing their competition. His wrist gave out and he dropped her. You would think she's fucking dead by the way they're acting. He just dropped her. It gets even more stupid. Okay, so Nate goes to her house, right? And Lola lets him in, and then Anastasia is once again in bed crying, this time not with Ryan. And Nate's like, I'm sorry, I fucked things up, but not in the way you think. And Anastasia's like, I know you didn't hurt Aaron. And then they truly just move on from that whole thing. She's just said, yes, I have been giving you the silent treatment for 2 weeks over what I know now was nothing, and it was your responsibility to come to me to fix it. But whatever, they want to talk about what happened at the competition today. And here's where it gets stupid because she tells them about the incident and she says, yet we somehow made enough points to qualify. How have all of the hockey boys learned about this incident when it was nothing, when you made it anyway? You made enough points to qualify. Okay, fuck off. What does it even matter? What does this incident even matter? Yes, she's bruised up, sure. But don't let her qualify. Show me who Anastasia is without figure skating. This is dumb as hell. This book is way too fucking long. Things keep happening and then they mean nothing. Then Nate and Anastasia play house, which means that he bathes her. And they get in her shower and he's like, oh my god, this is crazy. There's so much girl stuff in here. It's so smelly in here. What's an exfoliator? Shut up. That made me want to punch him in the fucking face. Okay, so this is where I've left off. They're having a bit of like makeup shower sex, which what I will say about this book is that the sex scenes I think are more effective than Ice Planet Barbarians, which is funny because that one was truly purely smut. These ones are more focused on describing like the feelings rather than just telling us every action in a list like Ice Planet Barbarians did. This is certainly not the worst book I've ever read in my life. I actually understand its popularity. I don't feel any judgment towards people who like this book because I can see that there are things to like here. It's over 400 pages for no fucking reason, but that means that you're getting to know this cast of characters, and the characters are characters despite being very tropey. They are characters that the book wants you to have feelings about, and it's allowing you to have feelings about them. It really is not that bad. Obviously, I am reading it in the context of it being a book that has been chosen specifically to torture me, so I'm going to be extra critical about it, and maybe unfairly, but I don't think I'm giving you the best representation of my experience reading it. Honestly, at this point, it's sitting at around 2 stars, which I think is pretty fucking remarkable. I will say that if there is a third act breakup that comes after the first act breakup and the second act breakup, I'm going to fucking freak out. I'm so tired of their back and forth. I also think, and listen, I've been debating on whether or not I want to say this, because it says on the back of the book that when Anastasia's skating partner faces an uncertain future, she may have to look to Nate to take her shot. And I thought that meant that it's going to put Nate in as a figure skater. And I thought, there's no fucking way. There's no way this book does that. But something is going to have to happen here. Aaron's wrist is obviously still hurt. He's not going to be able to skate. Is Nate going to become a figure skater? Is that what's going to happen in the last 200 pages of this book? If it does, it's going to drop a full star at least, because that's fucking ridiculous. That's not how figure skating works. It's different skates. They use different skate. Like, they're not compatible in this way. But part of me thinks I just have too low of an opinion of this book. I'm looking down on it because no book would do that, right? It's not going to do that, right? It has to mean something else. It can't mean that. I really hope not. I'll update you once I know, 200 pages from now. I'll see you then. Bye. All right, I'm back and I have finished Icebreaker. After I spoke to you last, I was thinking about how bad I had made the book out to be. And while I didn't necessarily say anything untrue, I was just thinking about how I was kind of giving the wrong impression with my experience of the book. Like, reading it, I wasn't really feeling like it was a terrible, terrible romance book. It was just a book that had some issues, and I wasn't hating it nearly as much as I made it seem like I was hating it. And then I read the last 200 pages, and those pretty much negated everything that I thought I was liking about the book. It ruined it. It took it down a whole star from 2 to 1. And then I read the epilogue, and every 3 sentences I was needing to put the book down because it was so incredibly bad. It was making me so angry. I was kicking the fucking air. And that brought it down to 0 stars, that epilogue. Oh my fucking God. Okay, so I'm going to try to summarize this more quickly than I did yesterday, because what the fuck was that? I feel like I sat here and talked for over an hour. It made it seem like so much more happens in this book than it actually does. The last thing that you heard me tell you about was how Anastasia and Nate had made up after their honestly nothing burger fight. That feels like a million years ago now. They made up by washing each other in the shower, and then afterward, they finally talked about it. And this is another one of the many nonsensical conversations that are had in this book where characters are just saying things that really have nothing to do with anything, but that the author thinks is something someone would say. It's hard to describe, but I do notice it in all kinds of different books, not just kind of bad romance. Like here, Nate says, "I can't believe you think I could ever reject you, Anastasia. You have no idea, do you? The lengths I'd go to if you'd let me, what I'd do to make you happy. But like, what? What does that have to do with anything? The crux of their fight had literally nothing to do with Nate rejecting Anastasia. Like, sure, she had the thought of, I don't want to call him because he'll be mad that I didn't believe him in the first place. But there was so much more to it than just that. So much more to it that needed to be addressed. And yet this line that Nate says is one of the only ones spoken about the weeks that they have spent apart. It feels like Hannah Grace just wanted him to say those lines because it's like sweet, but it means nothing. Anyway, their conversation is interrupted because Aaron is banging things around in the house because he's mad that Nate is there, which is real as hell. At this point, I was still enjoying Aaron as the antagonist. Everything he did, I was like, he so would do that. The next scene is Anastasia getting drunk at a bar alone because Aaron's doctor has said that he can't figure skate for 8 weeks. And Russ, who you might remember from before, really does not matter. He's inconsequential. He sees Anastasia here and he calls Nate and then he takes her out for coffee. This is one of a few moments in the story where you read it and you're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. The author is just setting up these characters so that she can write sequels following them. It's honestly nothing that Russ is here or that Anastasia kind of gets to know him. This only exists so that a later book will feel more connected to this first one. Okay, then Nate picks her up and he wants to solve her problem of not having a partner for the next 8 weeks. And so he says, why don't I be your figure skating partner? And she says yes. And then that's what happens. So I was being too nice. It does happen. What you think is going to happen does happen. And I was driven mad by it. Then we switched to Nate's perspective, and there's this really weird line where he was like, for me, Monday started great, got bad, and now it's good again, which seems like it's a reference to Anastasia's last chapter, which was laid out by talking about how bad Monday had been for her. It's very strange because this is the first and only time in the book that it seems like one narrator is aware of the other narrator's chapters. It never happens again. Nate's thinking to himself, I can't believe Anastasia said yes to me being her partner. I don't think I'll be any good, but at least I won't drop her. And now this book has really fucking pissed me off because obviously being a pair skater is so much fucking more than just like, well, I'm big and strong. I'm a big, strong man, so there's no way that I drop her. I'm gonna fucking kill someone. Okay, then for some reason, Anastasia's like, you can only be my skating partner if we don't have sex. This is a rule that has just popped out of thin air. So much of this book is like, well, literally everything would be fine and there would be no issues if you just didn't do that. Like, that's something that you just made up and then militantly stuck with, but what if you just didn't do it? Here, I think this only exists to recreate sexual tension that was lost once the characters started doing it on the regular, but when the characters are so incomprehensible like this, I start to care far less about them. So they go to the mall to get some leggings for Nate to skate in, whatever. They go get lunch at the food court, and Anastasia's like, I can't eat anything here. I'm on a diet. And Nate finally confronts her about this food plan that she has, and she shows him the food plan that Aaron had come up with for her. And he's like a food scientist. He's not actually. He's doing, I think he's doing sports medicine, and that means he knows everything. He's like, you're not eating enough. He's starving you. And she's like, you know, Aaron was struggling to lift me when I gained weight freshman year, and so we're just trying to stop that from happening. And Nate's like, I've seen him in the gym, and he benches over double your weight. So then Nate's like, I'm going to come up with an actually sustainable, realistic food plan for you. It's like kind of a thing throughout the rest of the book, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's like a little bit of forced character development, I think. Okay, then we go to their first figure skating session together. Nate has to put shorts over the top of his leggings because his penis is too big. His pee-pee's too big. And this very serious coach that they have is somehow completely on board with this fucking hockey player who knows nothing about figure skating. Oh my God. I'm going to go crazy. I'm actually going to go crazy. She literally doesn't fight this at all. At one point, she tells them to do laps, and it says she concentrates on Nate. Concentrate on being graceful, not fast, but keep up with Anastasia. Why was it written like that? This is another egregious example of something that happens so many times in this book where it's just using the same word twice in one sentence or two sentences where, like, it didn't need to be like that. How about she focuses on Nate and then says concentrate on, like, hello? Was there no editor? I feel like this is such an obvious way to make your book feel less clunky. So they skate. Nate isn't, like, good, but somehow it's passable. It takes way too long in this scene for an acknowledgement of the fact that they use different skates in hockey and figure skating, and it also blows it off like it's no big deal. And it's just like, oh, well, there's a toe pick in figure skating. Literally anyone who has gotten used to one kind of skate and tried the other can tell you that it is a big deal and it's very hard to get used to. I'm just so angry about this. This is not how figure skating works. This is not how anything works. This is so fucking stupid. Okay, Anastasia goes home that night and she gently confronts Aaron about the meal plan that was starving her, and he immediately turns to slut shaming her. So she calls Nate and she goes to stay at his place, which was just going to be for a night, and then she kind of ends up moving in with them for a few weeks, except still for some reason her and Nate can't have sex, so they sleep in the same bed but with a pillow wall between them. Why? I don't know. So it's a couple weeks later. She's been living here. She's been sleeping on the other side of the pillow wall. Nate has been coaching her out of her disordered eating and walking her through her anxieties about gaining weight. And he has been her figure skating partner. He says something like, it's been 2 weeks of her proving that she's a better skater than I am, which I know is just him making a little jokey joke about how they're both very competitive people, but that drove me crazy as well, because of course she is. She's a figure skater. Any figure skater is better at skating than any hockey player. The same way a hockey player is going to be better at playing a team game than a figure skater is. Okay. Take a breath. Then one day, Nate's dad shows up. He has a complex relationship with his dad. If you remember earlier, he had that line where he said, but sadly, my dad isn't normal, which is awesome. Also, his dad seems like a pretty normal, like high expectations, low affection, rich father. I think it would have been cool if his dad actually wasn't fucking normal, if he was like an absolute freak, but he's not. He shows up to say that he needs Nate to talk to Nate's younger sister, Sasha, because she's threatening to quit skiing. And all this dad cares about is skiing. He runs a ski resort, okay? He wants both of his children to be star skiers, but only Sasha did it. And now she's saying, I'm going to quit if you don't take me on vacation. Nate's dad is very much like Aaron, and that is a parallel that the book wants you to draw, and part, I think, of why Aaron drives Nate so insane. Not much really comes of this visit. It's kind of just like a oh shit moment, because I think things were just like getting a little bit boring for a second there. We go back to Anastasia, who's been struggling to feel safe and comfortable with the lifts after Aaron dropped her at that competition. She says that her and Nate practice in the gym all the time, but once they're on the ice, she can't do it. Aaron has watched her skating with Nate and seen her struggling, and he's like, I want to talk. Let's fix things. Nate says, absolutely don't talk to him. He doesn't deserve to be in your presence. And Anastasia is like, he is my skating partner. We have to maintain some sort of relationship, even if we're not friends. This is a back and forth that will drive the last 100 pages of the book and get really, really tired. They talk. Aaron's like, I've been wanting to talk, but I've been mad at you. She's like, what the fuck did I do? You're the one who's been in the wrong. He says, well, you moved out without telling me, and then you moved in with the guy who's the reason I can't skate. And then he kind of just goes on and on with the verbal abuse, and then abruptly switches to saying, when are you coming home? I miss you. And I hated seeing you skate with someone else. And she's like, I need time to think about this. Then she leaves with Nate and they throw a party. Who is surprised there? These people are always, literally always drinking and partying. Things happen at the party, but none of it matters. I think this book is in some ways trying to live out a fantasy of university life that nobody really experienced except like a select few. I certainly was not partying and drinking like these people, but I understand that that is other people's concept of what happens in university. And I think you can live vicariously through this book, and that's why there's so much drinking. Okay, then Nate takes Anastasia to the pool to practice their lifts where it's safe for her to fall. And everything about how they've been practicing on solid ground and then can't do it on the ice is completely forgotten, so that we can have a scene where Anastasia is wearing an itty bitty bikini and Nate isn't allowed to have sex with her because they're skating partners, whatever that means. This is also a scene that mentions their height difference maybe 14 times. She gets over her fear because Nate is big and strong and she knows that he's going to protect her. Not even one time do they mention Dirty Dancing in this scene. Okay, now it's Christmas time. Both of them are like trying to navigate presents for each other while being in really different income brackets and not really communicating about expectations. It's also at this point in the book where we start in on the I love you issue. They both want to say it, but neither of them knows if it's the right time. I thank God every day that my partner and I were friends for almost 10 years and had lived together for 5 years before we started dating, because we were already saying I love you by the time we started dating. This shit seems horrible. I understand why this is a part of the book, because I think in a relationship, this does just come up. There's this awkwardness around saying I love you. I am so glad to not have to experience that ever again. Also, they start doing it again. Honestly, there isn't even that much to it. Like, we've had this whole made up, we can't do it if we're skating partners thing. And then it doesn't even take much for them to finally start up again. And it also doesn't feel that significant. This forced tension really doesn't pay off. But they are hiding it from their friends. And at one point, Nate thinks, based on the fact that Henry thinks I'm chilling in the friend zone proves that we're getting better at being discreet. That is grammatically incorrect. Am I crazy? It should say, the fact that Henry thinks I'm chilling in the friend zone proves that we're getting better at being discreet, right? Also, this is like such a small, inconsequential nitpick, but I noticed both in this book and in Ice Planet Barbarians that they say the fact like a lot. In Ice Planet Barbarians, I think it's 13 times, and in this book, it's like 23, which, to be fair, there's 430 pages of this book. I don't know why this stands out to me as much as it does. I think that it often makes a sentence feel clunky to have the fact in there, and it's very obvious that that is like the easiest way of phrasing something without being a good way of phrasing something. Okay, then there's a Christmas party. The whole time Anastasia is depicted as like an excited little toddler bouncing off the walls, and it's all a bit weird, but nothing that we're not used to. At the end of the night, they're sitting around a campfire, and Anastasia thinks to herself, being around a campfire kind of reminds me of camping. So good, so good, so good. Okay, she falls asleep in Nate's lap, and then all of a sudden she wakes up because everyone's rushing inside because there's a fight. And Nate is like, you need to stay here. I don't want you to get hurt. But of course, she's a really stubborn character, so she goes inside to find Henry and Nate and JJ fighting Aaron and two of his friends. And Anastasia thinks to herself, as far as Christmases go, this one now looks like one from Nightmares. That's exactly how she phrases it. That is the best simile and the best phrasing in the whole book, maybe in the whole universe. As far as Christmases go, this one now looks like one from Nightmares. What? Once they run everybody out of the house and the party's over, Nate is like exceptionally angry at Anastasia for not listening to him and coming inside because she could have got hurt. And at first it's like really annoying, like, oh my God, dude, move the fuck on. There are other things that you should be focusing on right now. But then you realize that he's acting like this because he's full of adrenaline and he has to get it out of his system or his heart is literally going to explode. Apparently what happened is that Aaron showed up to this party drunk for some reason. He was shit-talking Anastasia, to what end, I don't know. And then Henry punched him in the face and Henry doesn't feel sorry about it. Then there's this whole thing where Aaron has apparently been shit-talking Anastasia literally all over the place to anyone that will listen, and Nate knew about it but didn't want to say anything to her because he didn't want to see the hurt on her face, which, like, sure, I can understand that, but he also didn't say anything about it in the book, which feels like a glaring omission. That is definitely something that Nate would have had thoughts and feelings about. He fucking hates Aaron. So the next morning, Henry comes into Nate and Anastasia's room and explains everything to her about how Aaron had been shit-talking her to everyone and how for some reason the night before he came to this party to say that no one would ever love Anastasia because her birth parents didn't love her. She's adopted. I don't know if I said that. It has no bearing on her life. This is so ridiculously comically evil, and it also feels a little bit like a playground insult. Like, these are people who are in their 20s. Henry also says here that that Aaron calls her a Jersey chaser, as if that's like a slur. Then it moves on to Anastasia and Nate planning Christmas. They're going to Anastasia's parents' place for a couple of days, and then they're flying to Nate's dad's mansion, which will be empty because he did end up taking Sasha on vacation. And it is telegraphed from the very first moment that these plans start being made that they're going to show up early. You know that they're going to get home early and surprise Nate and Anastasia, who are going just in the period of time where they're not going to be there. And then they go, and Nate is talking about how Anastasia is the perfect girlfriend because they're boyfriend and girlfriend now, but she's a nightmare to travel with because she's a control freak, though he does say he likes bossy Anastasia because she's determined and sassy, fucking hilarious when I don't listen, and she starts scowling. I love that list. What is the last item doing in there? And she starts scowling? What are we talking about? They have a lovely visit with Anastasia's parents, who have seemed through the book to be these kind of overbearing parents with crazy expectations, but are actually more so people who are unsure how to best support Anastasia with her obsession with skating, and she projects a lot of her own insecurities onto them. And I think it is a pretty well done representation of this dynamic. Of course, her parents love Nate. At one point while they're chatting, he does have the thought, I changed the subject to move on from this one, which is just unbelievably redundant. They go out for dinner. An ex of Anastasia's is their server. It doesn't really mean anything at all, but I'm bringing it up because it's going to be funny later on. While they're getting ready for this dinner, Nate calls her curling iron a hot stick thing, which makes me want to kill him and the author. Men know what a curling iron is, you absolute doofus. Nate has a younger sister. So far, he hasn't known what conditioner, a curling iron, and exfoliators are. Come on. Okay, so then they go to Nate's house, and it says about 17,000 times that they're so glad that they're going while Nate's dad isn't there because he's a shitty guy, and that they're so happy to have the place to themselves, and oh my God, thank God that we booked our flights the day before they get back. I wonder what could possibly happen in this situation. Oh my God. While I'm not certain that it does absolutely want you to know that they're going to show up early, it does mean that absolutely everything that Nate and Anastasia do in the house while they think they're going to be home alone is made horrific by your knowledge that his family is definitely going to show up at one point, because obviously what they're doing is having sex on every surface. They're also really thinking about the I love you thing now. No idea when to say it. Then Nate has to go out early on Christmas Eve to pick up a present for Anastasia, and she decides to skate on the lake behind his house by herself, and she falls through the ice. And as soon as she falls through the ice, you're like, okay, I see what's happening here. We're putting these characters in a high stress situation where they have to think about like the prospect of losing each other so that they have that final push to say I love you. And of course that is what happens here. But it is such a dramatic scene. It's so ridiculous. She like falls into the lake and then he gets there and he throws her a lifesaver and she grabs onto it and holds onto it while he pulls her back up onto the ice. And yet once she's up, she's not breathing and he has to like give her CPR. I'm sorry, at the line, she's not breathing, I burst out fucking laughing. That's hilarious. They spend the night in the hospital. Everything's fine. Big whoop. That was the whole thing. It was so they could say, I love you. They hang around the house for a couple of days afterwards, kind of just like recovering from the shock and also learning things about each other. Nate tells Anastasia that he hates his dad, mostly because his dad was actively cheating on his mother while she was dying from a rare blood disorder. And also, he's like a greedy little pig. And when Robbie was paralyzed in this skiing accident that has been brought up many times, he refused to pay even though it was at his resort. He didn't use the company insurance, and Robbie's parents had to get a lawyer involved. And oh my fucking God, Anastasia thinks, oh, I knew Robbie had been injured in a skiing accident when they were kids, but I never even considered that it could have been at Nate's dad's ski resort. She is dumb as bricks. What do you mean you never thought that? After a while, they finally decide to open their Christmas presents, and this, yet again, pissed me off. Back when Nate was doing that last-minute Christmas shopping, it was because he didn't want to deal with packing this present and bringing it all the way to his dad's house, okay? So he ordered it to his dad's house, his dad rejected the delivery, and then he had to go pick it up in store. The present is an iPad to replace Anastasia's planner that is like not really that important, though is the tagline of this book. He's the one thing she couldn't plan for. She did not incorporate it well enough to justify that. Anyway, it's an iPad. Sure, maybe you didn't want to travel with the iPad. Then we learn that they have an entire suitcase dedicated just to presents. You're telling me you couldn't have fit the iPad in there? You needed to do all this bullshit to avoid packing up an iPad? Come on, Hannah Grace. We all know that you just needed a reason to get Nate out of the house so that Anastasia could almost drown. Okay. Whatever. His dad and sister show up while the two of them are covering each other in whipped cream on the fucking kitchen counter. Like I've said, everybody's really comfortable with sex in this book, including the 16-year-old sister. She is the only one who sees them. Thank God his dad does not. It like isn't really a big deal or all that embarrassing. I think that if this happened to me on either end, I would make a really rash decision. So then they go for dinner with Nate's family, and his dad is the asshole that you'd expect him to be. And of course, Anastasia stands up to him and it's kind of awkward. Also, their server is Nate's ex-girlfriend, which is why I brought up the server from before. Nobody comments on this coincidence. The next morning, Nate and Anastasia are set to leave, and Nate has a really short heart-to-heart-ish, but like obviously emotionally stunted with his father, where his dad says like, I like your girlfriend. She reminds me of your mom. Strong-willed. And Nate's like, well, if you love my mom so much, why'd you cheat on her? And he goes, people make mistakes, Nate. And Nate says, yeah, some mistakes are unforgivable. And he nods and he says, I know. And I thought, you know what? I kind of like that. I don't know why that kind of got to me. I think it was impactful. And then, of course, Nate has to take away any feeling that I had about this moment by over-explaining what just happened and saying, he hates himself more than I could ever hate him. We got that. Like, that was conveyed through his gesture and his words. You didn't need to tell me. It would have been so much better if you didn't tell me. The two of them head back to their lives in Maple Hills, where Erin has been cleared to skate again, and Anastasia wants to move back into her apartment. Nate is having a lot of feelings about this, and he's lashing out, and Anastasia stays really level-headed and will fully say to him, don't talk to me like that, and I love it. Erin and Anastasia meet with their coach as a mediator, and Erin suggests that the two of them go to couples counseling, not for like dating couples, for like teammates. Anastasia thinks it over and she ends up agreeing because she is stuck with Erin if she wants to continue pursuing her dreams, and she's willing to make sacrifices to maintain an amicable relationship with him. But of course, Nate doesn't want her to do this, and this causes a lot of tension with him. He hates Erin with every fiber of his being, and he thinks that Anastasia is making the wrong decision, and he refuses to listen to her point of view or understand what this decision means to her. Instead, he's just like, you don't need to do anything for that piece of shit. He doesn't deserve you. Like, he truly just is not getting this. And a lot of his feelings are driven by jealousy. He doesn't want her spending so much time practicing with Erin when that's what they were doing when Erin couldn't skate. Nate is portrayed as in the wrong here in this ongoing fight, where Anastasia is so emotionally intelligent and level-headed. Even Nate's hockey friends, his roommates, hold an intervention where they say, dude, you are being a fucking asshole. You need to actually see her point of view. I like that Hannah Grace isn't afraid to portray her big, lovable hunk as being in the wrong, as being an asshole, as lashing out and having an ego. Then all of a sudden, it's the big competition. With how she's meant to be this meticulous planner and devoted skater, it is surprising how little skating comes up in her life at all. Like, truly every competition, it's just all of a sudden been like, okay, now it's the day of the competition. There's no build up. That means the stakes are not established until day of, so you don't feel them at all. Nate has a hockey game on the day of her competition, and he runs into the other team's coach, who reveals, who could have guessed, Aaron was not hurt by slipping on a Looney Tunes oil slick outside his locker. He was hurt when he was hanging out with this other coach and their friends from UCLA on the beach and they were roughhousing. He hurt his arm. He framed Nate. Who could have guessed? As soon as Nate is free from the game, he rushes to Anastasia and he's in time to watch their first performance of the competition, and it all goes absolutely perfectly. They do so incredibly well until the very last second when Aaron grabs her face and kisses her. And then it goes to her point of view, where she is pushing against him on the ice in front of everyone, and he won't let go of her. He is assaulting her in front of hundreds of people after the biggest moment of their lives. Nate rushes backstage, he asks if Anastasia is okay, and then he punches Aaron right in the face. Anastasia is like, I am done, it's over, I'm not doing this with him anymore, but the coach begs her to stay just for the scoring. They score really well. Anastasia tells the judges, I withdraw, I'm going solo. I find this to be a really annoying way to end all of these character arcs. One of the points here is that it seems like Aaron was romantically interested in her this whole time, or else like, why would he kiss her? Though I do think, and I'll give this the benefit of the doubt, I think that it was mostly him like expressing dominance and control, but I also think you could have done that in a different way that didn't imply that he was interested in her this whole time. But what I really hate about this is that Nate, who was being a dick about Anastasia's very reasonable decision to keep working with Aaron, who was again and again shown to have been cruel and selfish about this situation, ends up being in the right. And Anastasia ends up making the decision going solo that Nate wanted her to make, but only after being narratively punished with assault for what the book recognized was doing the right thing for her and continuing to skate with Aaron. And then she's like embarrassed for making that choice in the first place. I don't know. This whole thing just made me really fucking mad. Then we get a Nate chapter, which takes place 3 months later, in which the characters are having conversations with each other that they obviously would have had in the last 3 months that they have no reason to be having now. And the coach says shit like, my life is going to be so much easier when you graduate in 2 months. As if anyone wouldn't have just said, when you graduate. Then the most annoying thing that could happen happens. And there is an epilogue. This epilogue is from Anastasia's perspective. 2 years later, and she is pregnant. That reveal alone had me wanting to bite someone because Anastasia has been repeatedly expressing throughout this book her disinterest in having a baby, saying at most she wants to adopt. And though I don't know how true this is in real life, in the book it's made very clear that in this universe, pregnancy puts an end to a professional figure skating career. So what a shitty fucking note to end on for this character who is only 23 to give up her dreams for a man and a baby. Except it tries to sidestep this in the worst way possible, in the fucking corniest way. Anastasia is at an appointment with her doctor, and she tells her doctor, we think the baby's going to be a soccer player. And the doctor says to her, well, with a mom that's a gold medalist and a Stanley Cup winner for a dad, this baby's going to be good at whatever it does. Oh my God. 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 I can't even talk about how much I hate that. I actually feel like I can't breathe. I thought that people were being dramatic when they said things like, I threw the book across the room, but this truly almost got me there. Sorry, in 2 years, she got a gold medal solo figure skating after doing pairs for her entire life. I don't fucking buy it. Also, to have both of them achieve their dreams off camera like this and then throw it in as if it's going to satisfy us enough to not take issue with the pregnancy is delusional. The actual very last bit of the epilogue is Anastasia and Nate heading to Mexico, and yes, they do get stopped for pictures about 1 million times. Girl, nobody knows who you fucking are. You have 1 gold medal in figure skating. Shut up, shut up. At most, you are being stopped once, and even then, maybe. They get to Mexico, they go to a restaurant for dinner, and there's this like huge setup with this like trail of rose petals, and yet Anastasia is shocked when Nate gets on his knee and proposes to her. And that is how the story ends. I'm so mad. I am still mad. I was fucking with this book. I was accepting its flaws and its limitations, and I was appreciating the things that it could have done a worse job with. And then That's the ending? It took the whole thing down an entire star. I'm sorry, you made me suffer through 430 pages for the end to be she is pregnant with a baby that she was very clear she didn't want. I'm going to kill you. Now everything that I was going to let slide is on the table, and there are lots and lots of small errors in this book, and they build up. Many a misplaced comma or an and where it doesn't make sense in a sentence. I've given you examples of that. Constant repetitive phrasings and word choices. I've also given you many examples of that. There are tons of issues with the tense changing in the middle of a sentence. Then things like logistic, where logistical would be more standard, or whom when it should be who. Also sentences that are arranged really poorly, like I just don't care anymore about playing nice, which should kind of obviously be I just don't care about playing nice anymore, or pregnancy has made everything heightened. Why is that not pregnancy has heightened everything? She uses the phrase an oxygen stealing hug like 3 or 4 times, even though it's not even a very good phrase. Everything is dragged. Like the amount of times that somebody drags a hand over their face or through their hair, it was relentless. At one point, she actually says Nate is wearing gray sweatpants because he's a man who was most definitely written by a woman, which made me beg to be taken out back. Listen, everyone and their mother has made a think piece on how this book is bad, and it is bad. And also I'm not watching them because a lot of it is like, book talk sucks, and I don't care. Why do we care? Why are we still talking about this? It's so boring. I'll say that I have read some absolutely bananas dog shit books lately with nothing redeemable about them. And I don't think that Icebreaker necessarily fits into that. I think somewhere under there was a little bit of potential, but it was absolutely squandered by this ending. And part of the issue there is that I don't think that Hannah Grace knew what to do with this book. That is evident in it being a meandering 430 pages. It's doing so many things, and I don't think it's doing any of them with any thoughtfulness or deliberation or depth. Like I've complained about, there are 40,000 characters. There are probably 30 just totally dropped B-plots. It's got 10 different tropes that going on that it's trying to like live up to and complete. So it feels like at the end here, she was just like, I don't know how to tie it all together. Fuck it. Pregnancy. Boom. That's the story. I don't even want to talk about what happened with Aaron. I think what could have been a complex character and an exploration of his relationships was totally flattened by making him like a dude who was either evil just because he was evil, or maybe evil because he was secretly in love with her, though I don't really think that that's the case. What if we did anything else with that, though? Did you consider that, Hannah Grace? That you could have done anything else with his character? The most interesting thing that you wrote into your book? Oh my God. I got really tired of all of the other dynamics with the side characters because at some point you just realize like, oh, she just wants us to like these men because she's planning to write sequels that center around them. Almost none of it actually means anything for the characters that we are following or the plot. I, of course, thought that the sex parts were kind of boring, but that is a me thing. And looking at it objectively, I think that they were fine. Like, done honestly pretty well compared to other things that I've read, particularly Ice Planet Barbarians. I wasn't scandalized by it. Let the Gooners live, you know? I was kind of scandalized by how involved their friends were because that is crazy to me. Not in a way that I think is like bad. It's just so far from my experience that it's hard to grasp, but what really is wrong with it, you know? At the end of the day, good for them. If they're all happy with this setup, then I think that's kind of liberating. I do think that there is an issue with like doing it in the Uber in secret and then screaming your orgasm at the point where it's too late for everyone to like withdraw consent at being a part of this. I didn't love that. I can't remember if I said it to you, but I told myself that I was going to look into the Icebreaker controversy because I was only like kind of aware of it. And then I didn't really do that. I'm sorry. I don't care. I'm pretty sure that the issue is that it has this cartoony cover and parents are buying it for their kids. And I think that's so stupid. I don't care to hear anybody's side of that. Obviously, Icebreaker is not trying to masquerade as a YA book. Like, how many fucking smut books have this same cartoon art style on the cover? Like, come on. We all have our fucking phones in our pockets. Like, you can just Google it before you buy it for your 12-year-old. It's not that hard. Imagine if I got mad at Netflix because I let my 6-year-old watch BoJack Horseman. I will say one thing about this, though. The alliteration of her name being Anastasia Allen and then his name being Nate Hawkins is so YA vibes. His name is Nate Hawkins. Are you joking me, bitch? That's Troy Bolton. Come on. I don't think that's a deliberate thing, though. I think it's just poorly conceived. And it's kind of funny when you think about that alongside the controversy. Because, like, I mean, if you're dumb enough to think that, oh my God, this is a book for children, and then you read the back and it's about Anastasia Allen and Nate Hawkins, maybe that would confirm your suspicions. At the end of the day, what I think is that if this book was 200 to 300 pages shorter, 25 characters lighter, had a completely different plot, was written by a different author and gone over by a different editor. It could have been really good. I would like to thank my book club and my wonderful partner for helping to organize this whole thing. It was so fun. I read through the secret chat where everybody was planning this out, and I want to specifically thank Kaiden, who really pushed for everybody to vote for the one queer hockey romance that was in the list. I think there were 5 or 6 hockey romances in this list. Kaiden was pushing for it because, as he said many times, that's so chic. You were the only one looking out for me, babe. I also want to thank Dragon for holding back from putting in the Age of Scorpius. Thank fucking God for that. And though it was very close as a runner-up, I would like to generally thank you all for not making me read House of Leaves. And I want to tell the 36 of you that voted for Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand that you're on my shit list. What is wrong with you? Who suggested that? Anyway, I love you, my book club. You are also some of my favorite people in the world. I love hanging out with you, and I'm sorry that I have made you read such terrible books, but also I don't think anything I've done has really compared at all to what I went through in this video. So maybe now we can be equals again. Okay, bye.